Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I'm not a vindictive person all the time, of course. You don't manage to run a chain of convenience stores without a fair amount of likability. In fact, if you met me, the first thing you'd probably notice is how affable I am. But if someone crosses me, that's a different story. I don't settle for petty revenge. I go for vengeance. You want an example? All right. I used to play rugby, still do occasionally. I was a lock, one of the second-row forwards, tall, solidly built, and reasonably quick on my feet. During one game, I was chasing down a high ball when this lumbering loosehead prop, number 1, smashed into me mid-air. I landed hard, wrecking my shoulder and sustaining a mild concussion. The referee called it accidental, but I wasn't convinced. The trainer subbed me out to assess the shoulder, and the team doctor cleared me to return. When I got back on the pitch, the big guy gave me a smug grin. Confirmation enough that his hit was deliberate. That's when I made up my mind. During the next scrum, I made sure to send a message. He didn't know for sure that it was my fist that caught him, and the ref didn't see it either. But that was just the beginning. As it turned out, fortune smiled on the bold. Their number 1 got the ball and lumbered into a run. He was brought down quickly, and the ruck formed. But he managed to set the ball back cleanly for their scrum half. The scrum half took his time organizing his backs, and that's when I saw my chance. I drove up from underneath my opposite number in the ruck, catching him off balance and sending him sprawling into their number 5, who then tumbled onto the loosehead's arm. Unfortunately for him, his hand was on top of the ball when it happened, and the combined weight of the two players fractured his forearm. When the dust settled, I emerged with stud marks on my face and neck where someone's boot had caught me, nursing my shoulder again for good measure. The officials didn't spot anything suspicious, and as their number 1 was helped off the field, he gave me a hard look. But since I was also receiving treatment at the time, he couldn't quite piece together if I had anything to do with his injury. That didn't matter to me, I knew, and that was enough. I'm not reckless enough to start a vendetta, though. I got lucky that time. The opportunity presented itself, and the result exceeded my expectations. Honestly, I just hoped they'd slow him down enough for me to deliver a hard tackle later in the game. But you get the point. Cross me, and I will make sure you regret it. Managing the accounts for my stores gives me a solid understanding of what sells, when it sells, and what kind of money should be moving through the registers. I'm also quick to spot irregularities at the tills. Most of my staff are women, wives, single mothers, and students. Not exactly the kind of people with a lot of disposable income. To minimize temptation, I offer them a generous staff discount and allow them to take home any expired food, with the understanding that it's strictly for personal use. Essentially, I've made it so stealing from the stores simply isn't worth their while. The wages are above average because the stores are profitable, but it's the perks that really stretch their paychecks. So, when I noticed my wife withdrawing significant amounts of cash from our joint account, it caught my attention. I make a good living from the stores, so I've never had an issue with her spending money. After all, that's what it's there for. But she rarely uses cash. We don't even have credit cards. She typically uses her debit card for purchases. There are 2 important things to know about me. First, despite how the rugby incident might paint me, I'm a meticulous planner. On the pitch, you play in the moment. Seconds determine whether you score or lose possession. But in real life, I think things through carefully. That's why I invested in stores with solid profit potential, not the ones across the street or a few blocks down. Second, I loved my wife deeply. Before jumping to the conclusion that she might be stepping out on me, I needed to understand exactly what she was doing with the money. I owed her, and myself, that much. All right, I'll admit it. I was already in a headspace where suspicion had the better of me. That's part of the vindictive side of my nature. I tend to assume the worst. Still, my rational side keeps me grounded. There could have been a dozen explanations for the cash withdrawals. Maybe she had a gambling habit. Maybe she was buying weed. Hell, for all I knew, she could have been squirreling away money to buy me a surprise gift, or planning her exit. The question was, how was I going to handle this? All my stores are equipped with CCTV and security systems, with cameras over the tills that are practically invisible unless you know where to look. But was I ready to bring that level of surveillance into my home? Bugging the house seemed excessive, even for me. I decided it was smarter to wait until she was out and check for myself. I needed some solid information before making my next move. With the stores running smoothly and my office staff handling the paperwork, I had the time to think this through. I took a walk down the high street to clear my head and ended up in a phone shop. I've always had a weakness for gadgets, and they were promoting software that could download all the contacts from your SIM card to a computer to back them up. That sparked an idea, a potential starting point. If I could download everything from our phones to the computer, I'd be able to search her contacts and maybe get a clue about what was going on. That evening, I installed the software. Lisa, can I have your phone for a minute? Why? I got this new software that backs up all your contacts. If your phone ever fails, you can reload everything onto a new one without manually entering all the numbers. It's pretty handy. She hesitated. I think my battery's dead, she said. That's not an issue. It connects via USB, so it'll power up from the computer. It's a good thing, too. If your phone had a bad battery or something, it could have corrupted your data. After a moment's pause, she reluctantly handed over her phone. I opened a folder on the computer under my documents, labeled it phone numbers, and downloaded everything from her device. There you go, I said. It's all saved in a folder under your name. If you ever need it, just go straight to it. Is it password protected? She asked. Nope. Easy access if you need it. I shifted gears, casually browsing the internet for classic cars while she watched her soaps. I had my eye on an E-Type Jaguar. If the right one came along, it might just be worth it. Eventually, Lisa hit her limit on TV drama and got up to make a cup of tea. The moment she stepped away, I quickly copied her file and emailed it to myself at work. I usually didn't bother checking Lisa's phone bill. It was paid by direct debit, and I'd never had a reason to look. But this time was different. I grabbed the folder from the desk drawer and took it to work. My first step was to go through her phone numbers, and it didn't take long to spot the problem. The moment I saw the name Mark Donovan, I knew. A quick look at her phone records confirmed it. She was calling him a couple of times a day. Mark Donovan wasn't just a competitor in the convenience store business. He was also a football player. And to me, as a rugby man, that made it worse. Now I needed to confirm what I suspected. That Lisa was having an affair and, worse, using my money to fund it. Following them myself wasn't an option. I could take time off work without an issue, but I'm a big guy. I'd stand out like a sore thumb if I tried tailing them. A private investigator seemed like the only solution. I flipped through the yellow pages and found a company in a town about 10 miles away. I deliberately avoided the firm that handled my store's security, even though they were the best in town. Chances were Donovan used them too, and I didn't want to risk a conflict of interest. I booked an appointment and brought along a couple of photos of Lisa. The PI was an ex-cop, judging by his demeanor, and seemed fairly successful, though for all I knew, he could have been a flash git bluffing his way through. It didn't matter. All I needed was proof of the affair. He didn't need to be Sherlock Holmes. He estimated it would take about a week and asked for a 1,000-pound retainer, which I paid without hesitation. On my way home, I noticed the fuel gauge was low and pulled into a small petrol station to fill up. As I filled up the car, I looked around and couldn't help but feel I was staring at an untapped gold mine. The place had potential. When I went inside to pay, I realized it was a small, family-run operation, just a husband and wife team in their 60s. We struck up a conversation, and it wasn't long before they admitted they were looking to retire but hadn't taken any steps to sell the business. I asked for their price, quickly calculated it was about 250,000 pounds below what the place was worth, and suggested they get a professional valuation. Before leaving, I handed them my card. Look, I'm a businessman, but I've got to face myself in the mirror every morning. I might have a vindictive streak, but I don't exploit people, and I don't cheat. Well, not much. A week later, I got 2 important phone calls. The first was from Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, sounding almost sheepish. They told me the valuation confirmed the figure I'd mentioned. They seemed stunned when I agreed to their price without hesitation and asked for their solicitor's details to get the ball rolling. The second call came from my PI, and it was less pleasant. He confirmed Lisa was cheating, but not just with Mark Donovan. She'd met another man for lunch, and then spent the evening with Mark while I was at training. I instructed the PI to dig deeper and get me more details. Later, I drove down to settle up with the PI and check out my potential new acquisition. The investigator handed me photos of Lisa with Mark and the other guy. The pictures showed them in public. No explicit proof of infidelity yet, but damning enough. I handed over another 1,000 pounds and told him to get me something concrete for court. Irrefutable evidence of the affair and the identity of the second man. I played it cool for another week, continuing to perform my husbandly duties in the bedroom. A shag's a shag, and you take it when it's on offer. Lisa didn't act noticeably different, neither more hesitant nor more eager. Oral was off the table, as usual during the week. I wasn't too concerned about STDs since we always used condoms. Lisa refused to go on the pill, claiming it made her gain weight. By Friday, the PI delivered the final pieces of the puzzle. The second man was a bloke named Paul Daniels, a sales rep for a company that supplied bag sundries to stores like mine. Sewing kits, small rolls of insulation tape, electrical fuses, that sort of thing. Lisa had visited his flat twice that week. As for Mark Donovan, their rendezvous included some steamy action in a secluded car park while I was at training. That was it. My marriage was over. I'd seen and heard enough to know there was no going back. Timing was key, though. Knowing her cycle, I figured she'd soon be out of commission for a week, which gave me the perfect opportunity to start phase 1 of my plan. I grabbed some chilies from one of the stores and extracted their juice. Carefully, I smeared it onto the crotch of a few pairs of her knickers, the big ones she kept at the bottom of her drawer for that time of the month. I wasn't done yet. With a hypodermic needle, I injected a little of the juice into her tampons. I'd heard of guys using wintergreen for pranks like this, but that stuff has a distinctive smell. Chilies seemed subtler. I wasn't entirely sure it would work, but it felt like a reasonable bet. Donovan was a regular at the local recreation center's five-a-side games, where I occasionally joined in for fitness. My lack of finesse with the ball was a running joke, but I made up for it with speed and endurance. Goalkeeping rotated so everyone got a fair workout, and my rugby background gave me an edge when it was my turn. Donovan, full of confidence, thought he could run circles around me. He was slick with the ball, no question, but when he came in close while I was in goal, he couldn't find a way past. He tried sticking the boot in a couple of times. I made a point of drawing attention to it. Nothing dramatic, just laughing it off, but the message was clear. When the opposing team scored, we switched keepers. Donovan kept trying to get under my skin, taunting me. When he pressed in to steal the ball, I was a bit loosed with my footwork, clipping his ankle lightly. Later, when he had possession, I accidentally body-checked him hard enough to send him sprawling. Naturally, I apologized, blaming my lack of experience with the faster pace of five-a-side, and even helped him up. He didn't take it well, but the others backed me up. They'd seen his earlier cheap shots. The next game, Donovan upped the ante with a reckless tackle aimed at taking me out. I saw it coming and timed my move. As he lunged, his foot slammed down where my ankle should have been, but instead, his knee collided with my upswinging boot. The force and momentum caused his knee to twist in ways it wasn't designed to. The sound of tearing ligaments and cartilage was unmistakable, followed by his screams. Once again, I put on a show of concern, apologizing profusely for the accident, but no one else was buying his act. They'd all seen him try to injure me, and they made it clear he had only himself to blame. We called him an ambulance, and I even offered to drive his car home for him, just to be helpful, of course. He refused, naturally, but the damage was done. By this point, Lisa was feeling the effects of the tampered knickers and tampons. The chili juice was clearly doing its job, and she was visibly uncomfortable. After a couple of days, she finally went to the doctor. Of course, the doctor had no idea about the real cause and prescribed her a cream, which she discreetly stashed in her handbag. I hadn't tampered with all her tampons to avoid making it too obvious when her period ended. When I got back from football one evening, I found her sitting on the sofa, fuming, her face a storm of anger. "You scumbsucker! Who is she?" she snapped. "What?" I replied, feigning ignorance. "Don't play dumb. You've given me syphilis. Who is she? I'm going to take you to the cleaners, you cheating piece of shit. I'll take every penny you've got." "Wasn't me," I said calmly. "Must have been Mark Donovan or Paul Daniels." The mention of their names hit her like a ton of bricks. Her anger crumpled into shock. "What? You know?" she stammered. Without a word, I opened my briefcase and handed her a copy of the private investigator's report. "Pack your things and get the hell out of my house," I said coldly. Tears welled up as she broke down completely. "Where am I supposed to go?" she wailed. "That's not my problem," I shot back. "But if you've given me a dose, you're getting nothing from me." "Not a damn thing." I was beyond livid. As I mentioned earlier, Lisa refused to use the pill because she was worried about gaining weight. So we relied on condoms for birth control. If she had something now, it meant she'd been screwing them bareback. Disgusting. Serves her right. I grabbed a roll of bin bags from the kitchen and headed upstairs to the bedroom. "I'll give you a hand packing," I shouted, dumping the contents of her drawers into the bags without any care for what went in. I just shoved everything in, unceremoniously. Once I had all her things packed up, I loaded them into her car, took her keys, yanked the house key off the ring, and kicked her out. I slammed the door behind her, fuming, grabbed a beer, and sank into the recliner. I'd known about her cheating, but having it thrown in my face like that was enough to push me over the edge. It felt like my heart had been ripped out. I drank heavily to numb the pain. When I woke up the next morning, I was left to face the aftermath. Surprisingly, my hangover wasn't as bad as I expected, probably thanks to my fitness. I went into work feeling down and out. I took care of the usual tasks, made an appointment with my solicitor, and then closed my office door to think through my next steps. Oddly, I didn't feel the need to take revenge on Lisa, Donovan, or Daniels. I just felt empty. My staff noticed my mood right away, and Big Mary, the store's unofficial agony aunt, was sent to have a word with me. Mary was in her late 50s, had seen it all, and was one of those no-nonsense, motherly types who didn't let anyone get away with anything. She sat down across from me, waiting for me to speak. All right. Lisa's been cheating, and I kicked her out. That's it. I'm not going to do anything rash, so you don't need to worry, I said. Maybe not now, but I know you, Mary replied. Give it some time, and you'll do something that'll land you in jail. Who's she been seeing? Mark Donovan and some guy called Daniels. Oh shit. You aren't planning to crack skulls, are you? I chuckled. Actually, I busted Donovan's knee last night. Oh Christ. Are the police involved? No. I laughed again. We clashed in a tackle during 5-a-side, and he came off worse. She gave me a disapproving look. Boss, you've got a lot of people who depend on you, and they like working for you. It's time you grew up a little. You don't need to prove yourself all the time anymore. People come to your stores because they know you're solid, and they know you'll help them out if they need it. Donovan only gets business because you give him room to trade. This vindictive streak you've got is totally against your usual character. I looked at her, mildly surprised. Mary laughed. Everyone knows you play it straight, but if someone crosses you, you make sure they pay. That's why you don't have many problems. Now get it together. Stop obsessing over revenge and start enjoying your life. The business will take care of itself. This is the perfect moment to change your perspective. There'll be women lining up now that you're back on the market. If I were a few years younger, I'd be fighting them off. If it weren't for your Bert, I let the implication hang. Mary was a good-looking woman. You dirty bugger, she blushed. I'm old enough to be your mother. You started it. As Mary left, I realized she was right. I'd spent my life building a business, constantly feeling like I had to prove myself. It was time to stop that. Even my rugby was just me trying to prove something to myself. Sitting there, I took stock of my life and made the biggest decision I ever had to make. It was time to put away childish things. So, that's the turning point for me. Right then and there, I felt the urge for revenge drain away. My business has grown to a size I'm comfortable with. I can manage it on my own while still maintaining a personal connection with my staff. But I've also started expanding my social life. I still play rugby, but now it's more about staying fit, and I actually enjoy it more. I've taken up dancing and joined a hill walking group. I spend a lot of time hiking in Europe during the summer and have met some very fit women along the way. Fresh air and beautiful views seem to do wonders for building international connections. As for what happened with my ex-wife and her lovers, well, Lisa didn't come out of the divorce as well as she thought. I did right by the Harrisons, giving them the market value for their business. But to buy them out and rebuild the petrol station, I had to raise a mortgage on my own property. Removing the old fuel tanks alone cost a fortune. So when the divorce went through, I was left with a mountain of liabilities, according to my accountant. Since we were only married for 5 years and had no kids, my solicitor arranged a clean break settlement based on my net worth. Lisa got the house, but she had to take on the mortgage herself. She had to go back to work and struggle to make the payments. Eventually, the house went up for sale, and she disappeared from my life. As far as I know, she probably found someone else to latch onto. I never did figure out why she hooked up with Donovan. As for Donovan, his leg never fully healed, and he now relies on a cane. Not only is his football career over, but he's also put on a lot of weight. To make matters worse, his car was broken into while parked outside the recreation center that night. His laptop and briefcase were stolen, and rumors say he also lost a hefty amount of cash, though he didn't report that to the police. Between his slow recovery and the loss of his laptop, he had to sell off a couple of his shops. I thought it only fair to lend a hand, given that I was partly responsible for his injury. So, I bought his 2 best shops. He was managing on what he had left, until his laptop and some documents were recovered by the police. I'm now in the process of buying him out completely, just to help him settle his debts with the taxman. As for Paul Daniels, he'd been supplying sundry items to many shops, though not mine. Somehow, word got out about his affair with Lisa. Turns out, she wasn't the only wife he was seeing, and when someone else found out, Daniels ended up getting a severe beating. The police had too many suspects to figure out who did it, so no one was ever charged. Karma has a way of catching up, and just to set the record straight, it wasn't me. I had other plans that night, involving some passionate pursuits. Still, Mary didn't seem too surprised when she heard the news. Maybe just maybe, I've grown a little. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
I am Sam Walker, and my world came crashing down yesterday. My wife, Kathy, the mother of our 10-year-old twins, Owen and Hannah, has been unfaithful to me. The betrayal hit like a punch to the gut, leaving me seething with anger and at a complete loss. But as furious as I am, I know that violence won't solve anything. A dead mother and a father in prison wouldn't bode well for my kid's future. The truth is, I had already been thinking about divorce before I found out about Kathy's affair with her boss, Eric Langston. Now, it's no longer a question. It's a certainty. I can't stay in this marriage, not after everything. Divorce seems inevitable, and I'm okay with that. But I won't lose much from it anyway. I've been working odd jobs over the past year: plumbing, lumberjacking, construction work, even assisting a private investigator. I'm not an expert in any of these, but I do enough to cover for missing workers, and I get the job done quickly, usually in half the time others take. That's what keeps the contractors happy and me busy. So now, I need to plan my next steps. I'm ready to move on, for me and for my kids. My wife, Kathy, is a successful lawyer, the kind of woman who seems to have everything figured out. It's almost a cliché, the simple-looking girl with the great body who got pregnant by the no-good jock and married him. She built her career, moving up the ranks in law, while I've been drifting between jobs, still searching for where I fit in. In a way, I'm the husband who lives off her earnings, though the irony is that in a divorce, I might even qualify for alimony. Her demanding career keeps her out of the house most of the time, and that's what worries me about the kids. If she gets custody, and let's face it, she probably will, what happens to Owen and Hannah? Kathy would have to cut back her work hours, but I'm not sure she'd want to. Even if she did, would she know how to handle them? I'm the one who's been around for them more often, making sure they're fed, safe, and doing all right. Do I blame myself for her affair? No, I don't think I'm some passive doormat who contributed to it. I've always been clear about what I am and am not willing to tolerate, and her betrayal crossed a line that I can't ignore. I know who I am, and I won't lose myself trying to fix something that's already broken. When I found out about the affair, I wondered if I were being strung along until she found better prospects. This happens a lot in marriages, but most of the time partners hang on long enough till the rough patch of the marriage gets over. I think it goes with the territory, hanging on through the rough patches. Do I have hope for us as a couple in our marriage? The answer is no. I do not see a path to recovery. Yes, I am still in love with my wife, but I fear my future and I am unhappy with my present. I am afraid I will be setting myself up for disaster or disappointment if I overlook this indiscretion. Since finding out about her affair, I have learned a new understanding about myself and my needs. I have redefined my path and my plans. I will need an ex-wife willing to be halfway supportive of me in order that I can continue a decent relationship with my kids. Easing her out of my life, I am sure I will be fine, happy, and content, a better person in the long run. So, there you have it. I am a man whose woman is stepping out. What am I supposed to do in these circumstances? How am I to bring it up with Kathy? What about the twins? With all these questions in my mind, I sat down for breakfast on that Sunday morning. Kathy was sitting on the chair opposite mine reading a newspaper. It has been common for her to ignore me for days lately. I was not smart enough to weave a yarn with her anyway. I had barely finished my cup of coffee when she said, "I will be going out today. I have a day at a spa planned with Maria and Tammy. It might be late by the time I come back. We plan to go shopping, and then we will spend some time at the disco on 12th Street. How will we get a babysitter with this short notice?" I asked her, "Why? Do you have plans?" "I am going apartment hunting with Fred." "Fred? Moving out of his house? I thought he was getting along well with Wilma," she said. "No, Fred is not moving out," I said. This got her attention, and she neatly folded the newspaper and kept it on the dining table. She measured her words well while asking me, "Are you moving out? Is the apartment for you?" "Yes, I have been thinking about it for a long time. You and I married for all the wrong reasons. Do not get me wrong. I am not sorry about the kids. They mean more to me than life itself. But, let's face the facts. I am not an equal to you. I can never be the husband and life partner that you want. When you take a break from work and look around in a few years, you will get rid of me anyway. At that time, you will have all the options in the world. You will be rich, free of the hassles of bringing up babies, and you will still be an incredibly beautiful woman. The only one losing out will be me because I will be a poor nobody with a failed marriage behind me. If I work on a new relationship right now, maybe I can find a woman who will be happy to live the life I can afford. In a trailer home somewhere on the outskirts of the city. I am realist and I want to ground my feet again. She looked at me hard but did not reply. Then, with an elegant swoop, she got up and went to the living room. As I did the dishes, I saw her pacing in the living room talking on her mobile. When I stepped into the living room after doing the dishes, she was seated on the couch deep in thought. When she realized that I was in the room, she looked at me. There were tears in her eyes. Not overflowing, but a hint of them. I have canceled the day at the spa, she said, and then asked me, can you skip apartment hunting today and talk? I can do that, but there will be little good to come out of a talk. I realize you are used to me now, and you will miss me when I'm gone, but it will get better with time. I am only a mute companion who takes care of your house and our children. Trust me, a good housekeeper can do all this, even more efficiently. I will call Fred to let him know we will go apartment hunting next Sunday. I went to the phone in the corner of the living room and made the call. When I came back to sit down with her, I saw that she had a glass of white wine and a beer on the table. I grabbed the beer and sat down. So, what do we do now? Talk? I'm not very good at it, but let's do it anyway. What prompted you to spell the end of our marriage? She went right for the jugular. I have already said my piece on that. You deserve better. What you deserve is an educated man who can talk to you while you have your breakfast. You need a man who can take you to parties, someone you can introduce to your educated white-collared friends. You deserve a husband who is not a beer-guzzling simpleton. But there is another reason that drives my decision. We married for the wrong reason. We married because you were pregnant. We married because it seemed the right thing to do at the time. I will be honest to you, as I have always been. I was not in love with you when we married. I was a convenient lay for you. You were too busy with your studies and your new job to form a relationship. You met me, the guy who made you feel great in bed, and with whom there was no chance of any emotional complications. She tried to speak at this time and I stopped her. You asked me a question. Please allow me to finish my reply. You will get enough opportunities to cross-examine me during your rebuttal. Her eyes widened for a moment when she realized that I actually knew how to speak. In the beginning of our marriage, she used to practice in front of me, and I had picked up a few words here and there, and even some of her mannerisms. When we started sleeping together, I knew my position. I was the relief guy. You came to me twice a week like clockwork and had your fill of sex. I never dreamed that I would end up being married to you. I knew you married me because you thought it would be easier to have children around with some help, rather than being a single mother. But then I did something stupid. Once we got married, I fell in love with you. Sure, it was not the love that is written about in Harlequin romances, but mine was love of a common man for his beautiful and charming wife. I stopped to catch my breath. Try as I may, I could not get rid of the feeling of loss and despair that engulfed me at that moment. Now her eyes had tears, and a few teardrops rolled down her silky smooth cheeks. I leaned and wiped the tears away. It kills me to be the reason why you are crying, but when you hear me out, you will know it is all for the best. In our 6 years of marriage, I have been a dutiful husband and have done everything to keep the flame alive. I remember hearing you one morning on the phone talking to Betty and telling her that you thought you were gaining weight and wanted to join a gym. I knew that you did not have enough time to join a gym and make a routine of it, so I did the next best thing. I built you a home gym. I will tell you something about the gym, something that you do not know. I did not take a penny from our joint accounts while building the gym. Every penny that went into the gym was mine. I sold my baseball cards for the money. These cards were collected by my grandpa and my pa, and there were some additions that I had made in my days as a contract player for the club. I sold them online and got about $12K for them. It was enough for the equipments and the fixtures, but did not cover for labor. So, I did what I do best. I invested my sweat and blood in it. I had to get 8 stitches for one of the wounds that I got during a small mishap. I took a swing of the beer and continued. You have used it every day since then, but it is funny you never thanked me for it. You said it was wonderful and how it solved all your problems, and you even showed it off to your friends when they came around, but I am sure not one of them knows that it was my idea and my efforts that built the gym. By now, I could see that she was dying to say something, but I continued. Do you remember the first time you threw a party for all your colleagues at the house? It was the day you made a junior partner. You asked me to get all the things arranged, and then you asked me if I would mind spending the evening bowling because I would be bored by the conversation at the party. I stayed away, of course. I knew my limitations, and I did not want to be an embarrassment to you. But I can tell you now that it hurt like hell. I did not go bowling. I went to a pub across town where I was sure of not running into any of my friends, and I sat alone in a booth and cried. That was about a year ago. On that night, I made a decision that I would bow out easily and not give you any further opportunities for putting me down. Call me a fool, call me a chicken, but I could not admit that it had to be done quickly. Because I delayed. I did give you opportunities to put me down, and you took them. Do you remember the day you came home all worked up because one of the cases you were working on suddenly had new evidence, and you had to analyze it all in one night? I think it was the case of the missing bid documents that made you a full partner. Eric had come home with you that day to drop you off, and I entered the living room just as you guys had settled in. Eric asked me, without a please, to get him a beer, and you chimed in that while I was at it, I could get you a glass of wine too. At that moment, Eric, whom I had met only a couple of times, was treating me like a manservant, and you allowed him. Heck, even participated in my humiliation. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I have been saving a little at a time to enable me to move out. I know I am not as educated and as cultured as your friends, but I have been an honest, faithful, and loving husband. I do not have to take this from you or anyone. I am depressed all the time, and my self-esteem has gone into the toilet. Before I married you, I was poor guy, living for himself, but I was full of life. I went dancing, I had fun with my friends, and I loved hanging out with my friends and their wives. Now they avoid me because they know you do not like them. They would much rather not meet me than come between us. I am lonely. I am so lonely that I could die, and no one would miss me except our 2 children. By now Kathy was openly crying. She was looking intently at my face and sobbing. I felt sorry for her, but she would land on her feet. Eric was already in the middle of a divorce, and he would be free to marry her when the dust settled. I don't like the guy at all, but I guess they deserve each other. Kathy ran off the bedroom when she realized that I had said my piece. I sat and drank beer. What else was there to do? It was later in the day, around noon, that she came down. She was still dressed as she was in the morning. It was obvious that she had been crying but was calm when she came down. You have had your say, and now it's my turn. I will start at the beginning of our relationship and work through the timeline. Yes, when I first met you, I was the prim and proper girl looking for some hot construction worker sex, and I found you. Yes, you are right that there was a comfort in the thought that we both expected nothing from our time together apart from mind-blowing sex. But then I did something stupid. I fell in love with you. I have a confession to make today. I did not become pregnant by chance. I knew that you would not think of me beyond a good lay and would never try to build a relationship with me, so I deliberately became pregnant. I was in love with you even before we got married. Then why? I started to speak when she put her finger on my lips and asked me to stay quiet while she had her say. Now, we come down to the gym that you talked about. I honestly had no idea that you sold your baseball cards for it. In fact, I had no idea you even had a collection. This shows how little effort I had made to assimilate myself in your life. I have been a selfish and pampered child all my life, and I thought that it was enough that I was trying to assimilate you into my life. Now that you have talked to me, I realize that I had not even done that. I was conveniently living 2 lives. No, that is wrong. I was just living one life, that of a working woman. You were still my sexual relief, and the children were my way of keeping you busy. She stopped speaking for a while and composed herself. I am not even sure how things got the way they have. The only reason I avoided taking you to my office gatherings is because I thought you would be uncomfortable. As for not fraternizing with your friends, look at me. Do I have any friends? I have lost touch with all my friends, so how am I supposed to keep in touch with yours? I think it was because I knew that my job was important for us. I have lived with the pressure of being the sole breadwinner for the house. As for love, yes, I do love you still. You are an honest man, and no one can blame you for not trying. We all live with the limitations that we are given. Your limitation is your lack of education, and I cannot complain because I knew, even before I married you, that you would be struggling professionally all your life. I guess in my closed mind that made you a loser, but then not everyone is cut out to be a professional success. Look at me. I am a loser too, at least on personal front. She stopped and looked hard at me. The question is where we go from here. I do not see any other option but divorce. I am not getting a doctorate anytime soon, and I will be what I am. I said, and you deserve better. I was thinking at that very moment that I deserved better than a cheating wife, but I did not want to part on a sour note. That would put a dent into my relationship with my children. If she knew I was in the know of her relationship, she might avoid contact with me, either out of shame or resentment, and that would mean less contact with my children. But I do not want a divorce, she said. Life cannot always be about what you want. There will be times when what I want would matter too, and this is just one of those times. I am sorry, but I am not in love with the woman you have become. I respect you for your conviction and your contribution as the earning member of this family, but I do not love you anymore. I said, you are young, and I am sure that you will find someone who will be an equal partner to you. Just let me go. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. So, this is it? I guess so. I have consulted a lawyer as the first consultation was free. The only thing I want from the divorce is that you pay for the lawyer and that you give me unlimited visitation. I will not abuse the unlimited visitation and will accept any boundaries you set for me. I will be available as a babysitter anytime you have a social commitment, even a date. I will need a couple of hours heads up, though. Traveling on buses can be time-consuming. I laid my card in front of her. You do not want any alimony or split in marital assets. You have supported me in my job by taking care of the household, and you deserve some. She was quick to point out. Somehow, I don't want a divorce was missing now. I am leaving this marriage with exactly what I came in with, nothing. I have $3,000 saved, and that should tide me over while I try to stand on my feet. What are your plans after the divorce? She almost felt relieved that she was getting off with giving me nothing. I am not sure. I am just sure that they do not include you. I gave a curt reply. I can fight the divorce and make it tough for you. In fact, I will do that. I do not want a divorce. I want us to work on this marriage. Her defiance was back. I am sure you can, but you can't make me love you if I won't. I said and started thinking I might have to bring up her adultery to get rid of her. I did not want to do that and lose my children. I know how the courts are always in favor of the wife and how a poor guy like me, with no money to pay even the lawyer, would fare. I honestly love you. I beg for just one chance, and if you are not satisfied with our marriage in another 3 months, I will agree for the divorce, she bargained. Why? Will I suddenly become more acceptable to your friends? Will you be able to take time off from work and work on this marriage? Will you be able to wipe out the humiliation that was heaped on me for so long? Just accept it. I will never be good enough for you. Marrying me was a good romantic notion for a young woman, but you are a grown-up now, and you deserve better than an inferior life partner. We had a good run till now. I do not want a divorce when one of us is having an affair with someone else to fulfill some need in our lives. If we divorce now, it will be amicable, and we will still remain friends. I stopped. Okay, if you're hell-bent on this, I will agree. There is no point in flogging a dead horse. I wish you would have talked to me earlier, so that we could have worked on this and not reached this point, she said, resigned to the fate of our marriage. I am not blaming you for the divorce. I have only said what I have for your benefit. You are not been used to being in a relationship of equals for some time, and I do not want you to fall into the same trap with your next husband. I smiled reassuringly. I got up and told her, I am moving to the basement for a few days till I find a place to move into. We will talk to the kids and make them understand that we will still be their parents, but just not married to each other. My only request to you will be that you abstain from bringing dates home till such time as our divorce is final. It will help in their accepting the man in your life easier. If you do it too soon, they might resent you for replacing me too soon. You are still thinking about me. You still love me, she exclaimed. Why are you doing this to the family? How can you do this to your children? I know you want to hurt me, but you are hurting the children too. I wish I could tell you the real reason for the divorce, I thought, but that will damage my chances with my children. I said nothing and walked into the bedroom to get my things. She followed me, stood at the door as I went about gathering my things from the closet. Will you at least spend one night with me as a goodbye? That will only create more complications. I am not sure it is a good idea, but we have been sleeping together till last night, she complained. Oh, if you mean just sleeping together, I can do it for old time's sake, but not making love. I am not up to it, I replied. Why? Honestly, I've forgotten how to. It's been 3 months since you last said yes to my advances. I haven't even tried in last 2 months. Has it been so long? Why didn't you say something? She did not realize how long had it been since we last made love. Did you not miss sex in 3 months? I know you, and I know you cannot do without sex for this long. I have suspected infidelity for quite some time, but then someone as honorable as you will not do something so distasteful. I was losing my resolve. Her former sexual relief has not had any sexual relief because of her affair. I guess I was not even good enough for that anymore. A nanny, that is all I was, a nanny. I have never cheated on you. My sex drive is not as high as it once was. On top of it, my job pressure keeps me worn down, she said. So this is what it is all about, isn't it? Us not having sex? You did not listen to a word I said, did you? I sighed. You do not show me any affection. You do not think I am socially acceptable in your circle. You do not have sex with me. You do not talk to me unless it is about the children. You do not respect me. What do you do to show me that we are husband and wife? If I did all of that, would you call it a marriage? Fine. If you really feel this way, it is best we go our separate ways, she finally said, irritated. We slept together, and in the morning, while she was at work, I moved all my stuff to the basement. I left the wedding ring and our engagement ring on the bedside table and neatly arranged her clothes in the freed-up space in the wardrobe. I removed all my pictures from the bedroom and replaced them with the photos of our kids. I looked around and removed all the stuff that was mine. I took out 3 suits and 4 pairs of decent costly shoes and packed the rest in a cardboard box and labeled it for Salvation Army and placed them in the garage. Children came and had their lunch and as always became busy with their studies and games. It was in the evening that I sat down with Kathy to talk to the children and tell them about the impending divorce. Your mom and I are getting a divorce. I will be moving out of the house soon and you will continue living here with your mom, I said. Before I could assure them that we still loved them, Owen stood up and Hannah started crying. It is because mom is sleeping with her boss, isn't it? Don't divorce because of this. She told him on the phone that she was just sleeping with him but loved you. She still loves you, Owen shouted and ran to his room. I just took Hannah in my arms and calmed her crying while Kathy just sat there waiting for the sky to fall. I took Hannah to her room and stayed with her till she went to sleep. As I came out, I saw Kathy sitting at the exact spot where I left her an hour ago. I poured a glass of wine for her and a beer for myself and went and sat down beside her. I am sure Owen misheard you. Children have an overactive imagination. Don't feel bad. He will understand once we clarify the matter to him, I said as I sat the glass of wine down for her. You knew. Your reaction told me that you knew, Kathy said. You did not look shocked or saddened. You just looked like a deer caught in headlights. Why should it matter? Did I suspect you were having an affair? Yes. Do I blame you?
No.
I had to salvage the situation somehow. I did not want my relationship with my children to get strained. We haven't made love in a long time, and I know how your body works and how you crave for sex every 3 to 4 days. If you were not coming to me for sexual relief, you had found it somewhere else. And trust me, I understand. I am not highly educated, but I do read and I know the concept of a work spouse. You had been talking about Eric like a work spouse for a long time, and I am to blame that I did not talk about this earlier. I am sure you never realized when Eric took over from me, but he is your work and bed spouse now. Be with him. Be honest to yourself and admit that my utility in your life is nearly over. What I no longer do can be done by any good nanny, and your money can buy plenty of them. But I do not love Eric, Kathy whispered. Do you love me? I asked.
Yes.
Then how can you neglect me so badly and give Eric something that was supposed to be mine? How can you hurt me so badly when you love me? How can you allow Eric to treat me like a manservant when you love me? How can you let him laugh at my expense when you love me? How can you justify being sexually fulfilled with him in his bed when I am waking off to your picture? I stopped. I had tears in my eyes. Damn, it was not supposed to come out like this. I had no idea the children knew, and that they would thwart my plan. I don't know. I am ashamed. I am sorry, but most of all I am confused about what am I supposed to do next. I did let Eric into my life, but it was more by accident than anything else. I did not plan on it. It was at one of the longer conferences when I had been away from you almost 2 weeks due to my schedule. I was feeling randy, and after a few drinks I ended up in his bed. We both felt remorse the next morning. I have no plausible explanation for sleeping together after that day, but I guess it was just getting our rocks off more than anything else. She paused. Eric did not treat you like a manservant. You see, over the years I have talked so much about you with him, that in his mind the two of you are friends. He has a strange familiarity with you because he knows what color shirts you like. What is your favorite food? In fact, if you were to quiz him about all that you like and dislike, he will score a 100%. He has no idea that I do not talk about him with you. In fact, I do not talk to you at all. She stopped and sighed. Catching a breath, she went on. He was starting divorce proceedings against his wife at the time we started. He had come to know that his wife was sleeping with a colleague of hers. Last week, he withdrew the petition of divorce after he saw the parallel between his sleeping with me and her infidelity. He understood that they were spending too much time apart and has decided to work on his marriage. This also means that I do not sleep with him anymore. He is going to resign his administrative position after the next AGM, and I am in line to take over. That would entail more traveling and less time with you and kids. If we divorce, I will have to forego that promotion, and I will end up working under someone less competent than me. I had no clue where Kathy was going with her rambling, and maybe she didn't either. I just sat there, listening, trying to make sense of the mess spilling out of her mouth. What was she even trying to say? That Eric, my so-called friend, had no problem betraying me behind my back? That the affair was only over because he called it off, not her? So if he hadn't ended it, she'd still be sneaking around with him? And now, she wanted to salvage our marriage just so she could take her promotion and travel even more, leaving me and the kids behind? I couldn't tell if she was trying to fix things or just making them worse. Every word out of her mouth felt like she was digging herself deeper into the hole, and I was just sitting there, wondering how we even got to this point. "I am not sure what are you driving at," I said, and that opened the tear works. I was afraid that she was going to go into a fit or something, but after an uncontrolled, inconsolable bout of crying for 10 minutes, she calmed down enough to make some sense. "I will be lost without you. I do not know anything else apart from being what I have made of myself. How will I face life without you?" she said, almost despondent. "I will lose everything if I lose you. You never really had me." "What we had was just the illusion of a marriage," I said, my voice steady, though my heart ached as Kathy sat there, broken and in tears. "We may not be married for much longer, but I will always be here for you because you're the mother of my children. Your pain will only cause them pain, and I won't let that happen. I don't have love or respect left for you, and we were never the best of friends, but we are bound together by Owen and Hannah. For their sake, I'll always be around." I paused, watching her crumble under the weight of my words, but I knew it had to be said. "I'm sure happier days will come for both of us, just not together." It broke my heart to see her like that, but this was the reality we had reached. All I could hope for was that she wouldn't try to come between me and my kids. "Life goes on," I murmured, standing up to leave. "And it will, for both of us." Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Laying down ceramic tiles, each measuring 4 x 4 inches, in a 10 x 12 kitchen demanded considerable effort. Ronnie Jackson meticulously applied adhesive to each tile before carefully aligning it with the previous one. Ensuring proper alignment, he nodded in satisfaction, recognizing that even minor deviations in millimeters could jeopardize the project's success. Given Eccles' renovation and remodeling's commitment to 100% satisfaction, Ronnie ensured every tile was flawlessly installed before proceeding. Sensing the completion of a row, Charlotte, Ronnie's wife, contacted Eccles on Ronnie's behalf. Answering the call, Ronnie prepared to begin the next row, already reaching for the box of tiles. The days when Charlotte greeted him warmly were gone. Her inquiries had become curt and impatient. Charlotte asked when he would be done. Ronnie assessed his progress and estimated it would take him about 3 hours in Pritchard's kitchen. After hearing his response, Charlotte ended the call abruptly, leaving Ronnie feeling pressured to hurry up. Despite his eagerness to finish quickly, Ronnie compelled himself to work with deliberate precision. Amidst his tasks, thoughts of his wife, with whom he had shared over 2 decades, lingered. Ronnie's acquaintance with Charlotte began at Eccles' renovation and remodeling, where he first encountered her during his early days on the job. As Charlotte entered John Eccles' office, apologizing for her academic shortcomings at John W. Dawson High School, Ronnie observed her stout figure and long, wavy hair. Though distracted momentarily, he refocused on the array of hand tools in John's shed, only to be reminded sharply by John that Charlotte was his daughter. "Yes, sir," Ronnie responded, resisting the impulse to shrug apathetically. Sensing her father's reluctance for her to engage with his new employee, Charlotte adopted a habit of smiling flirtatiously and greeting Ronnie whenever they crossed paths. Ronnie remained courteous towards her, but didn't encourage her attention. "You understand, right?" John admonished Ronnie. "I don't want you chasing after my daughter, got it?" "I'm not pursuing your daughter," Ronnie replied honestly. In truth, 21-year-old Ronnie found 17-year-old Charlotte Rayner Eccles nothing more than a nuisance. She carried at least 50 extra pounds, struggled with severe acne, and possessed qualities that Ronnie found particularly unattractive. Additionally, he considered Charlotte to be quite immature. "Hey, Ronnie," Charlotte said coyly one day as Ronnie and another Eccles employee were unloading their equipment after a long day. "Uh-huh," Ronnie said, struggling with an unopened bag of quick-drying cement. "Listen, I turn 18 on Saturday." Charlotte leaned forward, granting Ronnie an unhindered sight of her blouse's front. "That looks nice," Ronnie remarked. "Happy birthday," another coworker chimed in with a smile. "So, Ronnie, what's my birthday present?" Charlotte playfully inquired. Close your eyes," Ronnie proposed, dragging his bag to the pickup truck's rear door. "Sure thing," Charlotte giggled. "What do you see?" Ronnie asked, tossing his bag into the vehicle. Nothing," Charlotte replied. "This is your gift. Happy birthday," Ronnie announced, dragging the bag of cement towards the barn. Lois Eccles compelled John Eccles to invite Ronnie Jackson to their home for Charlotte's birthday celebration. A medical store in Dolans, Utah sold Ronnie a lovely birthday card, while a pawn shop in Fairway, Utah provided him with a beautiful silver bracelet for $20. Lois pressured John into asking Ronnie to escort Charlotte to the prom. Despite wincing at Charlotte's appearance in a tight sleeveless dress, Ronnie courteously accompanied her, posing for photos, dancing with her, and escorting her home with a goodnight kiss. Days later, John reprimanded Ronnie for Charlotte's heartbreak due to his failure to call her. Despite his reluctance, Ronnie contacted Charlotte and asked her out, leading to subsequent dates. On the fifth date, Charlotte gave Ronnie her pureness. Tracy Lois Jackson was born 5 months after their wedding, and for the subsequent decade, Ronnie Jackson endured the least desirable assignments at Eccles Renovations and Remodeling. Ronnie was convinced that on some occasions, John Eccles deliberately secured jobs for Eccles Renovation and Remodeling just to burden his son-in-law with arduous tasks. Throughout the first 16 years of their marriage, Charlotte Jackson proved to be a devoted wife, striving to understand her husband's preferences and dislikes, mastering his favorite dishes, and observing silence on Sundays during Denver Broncos games. Charlotte also made efforts to lose weight, albeit with fluctuating success. Her skin improved somewhat, but acne scars remained visible, even with the aid of cosmetics. Despite these challenges, when Tracy attended Grover Cleveland Elementary School, Charlotte secured employment at the Garland County Public Library. Despite its modest pay, the comprehensive benefits, including health and dental insurance, made it a valuable opportunity. Right after commemorating their 16th wedding anniversary, Charlotte's cousin Darlene relocated to Dolans, Utah with her third or fourth husband in tow, their whereabouts a mystery. Darlene's boisterous, crude nature was matched by her husband Gary, who was no better, particularly since he was an ardent Dallas Cowboys fan. Unfortunately, Darlene's negative influence rubbed off on Charlotte, who became loud, brash, and prone to complaints, neglecting household duties, including cooking. Despite this, Ronnie, skilled in the kitchen and cleaning, didn't mind the extra workload. However, what was initially occasional slack turned into a nightly occurrence, as Charlotte, Darlene, and Gary often found activities outside the Jackson house. Meanwhile, Tracy learned household chores and sewing buttons on her school uniform, harboring resentment toward her father for her mother's neglect, rather than directing it at her mother. Ronnie's timing was almost impeccable. 3 hours after Charlotte's call, he completed the threshold installation. Struggling with stiffness in his back, Ronnie pondered his age while gathering tools and remaining tiles from the Pritchard house. Contacting Joan Eccles, Ronnie winced at the man's slurred speech, a result of a near-fatal blow that left him recovering slowly. John suffered a massive stroke shortly after his wife Lois disclosed her breast cancer diagnosis. Despite Lois's double mastectomy and radiation treatment, she remained burdened with caring for her husband, Dennis Eccles, aided by their sons Brian and Paul, along with Ronnie's assistance when necessary. Charlotte, the family's sole daughter, remained her mother's constant companion, driving her to Fairway Hospital and offering comfort during her moments of pain. Despite Lois's passing, John appeared reluctant to let go of life. Daily, he was wheeled into the office, cursing his useless left hand as he attempted to type on his computer keyboard. Afterwards, Dennis, Brian, or Paul would drive John home. Ronnie informed John over the phone that he was leaving Pritchard's job, and it was finished. John responded with grunts, barks, and wheezes. Back home, Ronnie savored the aroma of his favorite meal: pork chops, mashed potatoes, and French-cut green beans. After John suffered a debilitating stroke, Charlotte put the Jackson family on a heart-healthy diet. Despite losing 40 pounds on the diet, Charlotte remained overweight. Ronnie accused Tracy of going to Brigham Young University solely to avoid Charlotte's bland cooking, a claim Tracy didn't dispute. While Charlotte was busy at the stove, Ronnie leaned in for a kiss, but she waved him away and pinched her nose. Ronnie tossed his clothes into the hamper and washed away the sweat from his tired body. This work was tough enough when he was 21. And at 43, it strained his capabilities and didn't benefit his health. However, Dennis, Brian, and Paul paid no heed to his struggles. With mounting medical bills from John Eccles' rehabilitation, they claimed there was no money in the budget to hire help. Drying himself off, Ronnie ignored the reflection of a fit man in the foggy mirror. Clad in a t-shirt and shorts, he went downstairs just as Charlotte was setting his plate. "For dessert, we've got hot apple pie," Charlotte announced, placing a frosted mug and a can of beer before him. "Oh my God," Ronnie exclaimed inwardly, feeling bile rise in his stomach. He recalled the last time Charlotte served him frosted beer, enjoying it on her 35th birthday, months before their 17th anniversary. As Tracy was out with friends, Charlotte poured Ronnie a beer in a frosted mug. He savored the taste of the cold drink until Charlotte interrupted, saying, "Darling, there's something I need to talk to you about." Ronnie remained silent as Charlotte spoke at length about nothing in particular. Eventually, Ronnie urged her to get to the point, as his beer was almost finished. Charlotte then revealed that Darlene and Gary weren't exclusive. They had an open marriage. She then asked Ronnie if he had ever considered being unfaithful. "Indeed, I am a man," Ronnie affirmed. "I was eyeing that girl Shelley at the gas station," he confessed. Charlotte retorted, "Shelley from the gas station? As if you'd ever stand a chance." "But I'm married," Ronnie added. "Sure, I think about it, but that's where it ends." "Did you think I'd take it further?" Charlotte pressed on. "Did you believe you could act without facing consequences?" "I can't, Charlotte," Ronnie stated. "We're married. We made vows before our family and friends." Finishing his drink, Ronnie got up, cleaned his mug, and said, "We pledge to be faithful, to forsake all others, including Shelley from the gas station." "We could renew our vows," Charlotte proposed. "No new vows?" Ronnie replied firmly, placing the clean mug in the cabinet. "Our original vows suffice. While Darlene and Gary may have an open marriage, we don't and never will." "But," Charlotte began. "No buts. End of discussion," Ronnie cut in, exiting the kitchen. Ronnie hoped that was the end of it. However, Charlotte revisited the topic twice more. Each time, Ronnie firmly declined. "But honey," Charlotte persisted, "it's a testament to our love. We trust each other enough for this." Annoyed, Ronnie retorted, "Do you even hear the nonsense you're saying? If you think I should let you cheat to prove my love, maybe I don't love you." Frustrated, when Charlotte mentioned an open marriage for the fourth time, Ronnie called her father. Charlotte watched the phone ring. "Hello, John. How are you?" Ronnie greeted. Charlotte's expression turned pale, realizing Ronnie was speaking to her father. Adding to her unease, Ronnie asked for Lois. "Hey, Lois, Charlotte has something to share with you," Ronnie conveyed. "Charlotte, tell your mom about what Darlene told you." Reluctantly, Charlotte took the phone from Ronnie. As she tried to stand from the table, Ronnie, foreseeing her move, firmly restrained her. Feeling cornered, Charlotte rambled incoherently and eventually ended the call. "You're despicable," she snapped at Ronnie. "Listen, Charlotte," Ronnie warned. "Mention this open marriage idea again, and our marriage will end. We'll get divorced." Charlotte never raised the topic again. Relieved, Ronnie noticed Darlene and Gary's efforts to reach out diminished. The pair, labeled the Toxic Twins by Ronnie, visited less frequently. Fast forward 5 years, Ronnie observed Charlotte pouring his beer, nearly overflowing with foam. She wasn't adept at it. "I'll be 40 next Tuesday," Charlotte began as Ronnie tasted his pork chop. "Yes," he acknowledged, swallowing. "And I was a Vestal when we met," Charlotte added. "Turning 40 and being a Vestal," Ronnie remarked, taking another bite. "The big 40, Charlotte emphasized. "During all this time, I've only been with one man, luckily for you," Ronnie quipped. "You've been with what, at least 10 women?" Kid Charlotte queried. "Is that fair?" "Life isn't always fair," Ronnie responded, sipping his beer. "Considering my upcoming birthday and all I've done for you, Tracy, and my parents, I think I deserve some freedom. Darlene and I are heading to Las Vegas next week. She found a good deal at a casino," Charlotte shared. Ronnie continued eating and drinking. "While there, we might meet some guys," Charlotte proposed. "Not necessarily for anything serious, just a date. Let me see what it's like with someone else. It might make me value what I have even more," she said. "The sauce is almost perfect," Ronnie commented. "What's your take?" Charlotte inquired. "I've told you. The sauce is nearly spot on," Ronnie responded. "Charlotte, this is about me branching out, gaining experience," Charlotte retorted. "So, you're suggesting I'm being unfaithful?" Ronnie questioned. "I've made up my mind," Charlotte asserted. "You can either support me or opt for a divorce. Your choice." "I'll initiate the divorce," Ronnie stated. "Do we have any ice cream for this pie?" "Hold on, Charlotte. Divorces cost a fortune. We can't just brush that aside," Ronnie exclaimed, surprised. "What's there to discuss? You've clearly decided everything. You and your dubious cousin are heading to Vegas. You're not asking. You've already chosen Vegas. Forget our massive pile of bills here. You're off to Vegas for your Big 4 celebration. And while you're at it, maybe a date? Even though you're married, you think that's okay? I either support your plan or face divorce," Ronnie said, pushing his empty plate away. "Does this pie come with ice cream?" "It's just for 1 week," Charlotte defended. "A week, a day, a minute. It doesn't change anything, Charlotte," Ronnie responded, slicing a piece of pie. Infidelity is infidelity, and I won't be married to a cheater. So, no ice cream. Maybe you can take Darlene, Charlotte proposed. Absolutely not, Ronnie chuckled. Charlotte, I wouldn't be with Darlene if she were the last person on earth. Ronnie tasted the pie, frowned in distaste, and said, Oh, wonderful. You used that aspartame stuff, didn't you? Pushing his plate away. Standing up, Ronnie wiped his mouth, exiting the kitchen. I'm seeing a lawyer tomorrow to start the divorce process, Ronnie declared, heading upstairs. Pritchard's job was done, and Dennis wasn't planning anything until he got the green light to rebuild the federal savings and loan. But Ronnie... You never listen, Charlotte interjected. Sure, Ronnie yelled from downstairs. You never heard me. I told you the consequences if you brought this up again. We're getting divorced. In their third bedroom turned home office, Ronnie powered up the computer. Though outdated, it still functioned and had internet access. After entering a search, Ronnie began looking for lawyers. He found Penny Barnes's online form and completed it. Shortly after, he received a call confirming an appointment with Penny Barnes. The next morning at 10, after Charlotte cleaned the kitchen, she went upstairs. Undressing, she got into bed undressed. When Charlotte pressed against him, Ronnie pulled away. No thanks, he said, turning away. Good night. Ronnie woke up at his regular time, 5:30 in the morning. Even though he didn't have work, he still rose at his customary hour. Quietly, he left the bed and softly closed their bedroom door. Descending to the kitchen, he brewed coffee and checked his email on his cell phone. An email from Penny Barnes's office detailed what he should bring to the 7 o'clock meeting. Ronnie debated having a second cup of coffee. Hearing Charlotte moving around upstairs, he chose not to make coffee for her. If she wanted some, she could make it herself. No, I told him, give it to me. Charlotte's voice came from her cell phone as she descended the stairs. Spotting Ronnie calmly reading news on his phone, she let out a shriek. She quickly ended her call and pocketed her phone. Ronnie, what are you doing here? Charlotte inquired. I mentioned Dennis hasn't received approval to start rebuilding the federal savings and loan, so I'm free today, Ronnie replied. The grass is too damp to mow, so I caught up on today's news. Did you hear Burns & Burns is considering a second location? You could have saved me some coffee, Charlotte complained. You can ask Darlene to make you some, Ronnie replied, placing his cup in the sink. Penny Barnes, an attractive brunette, wore glasses that Ronnie suspected were just for show, to appear more intellectual and serious. Penny remarked, examining their financial documents. You recently refinanced at 3.9%? My daughter's in her final year, Ronnie explained. Plus, my in-laws had hefty medical bills. Their deductibles were sky high, then funeral costs. And Eccles was nearly bankrupt. A couple of projects went over budget because Paul failed to time the orders right. Yes, Penny nodded, reading on. So, Mr. Jackson, how will divorcing your employer's daughter impact your job? I plan to end the relationship, Ronnie responded, a hint of a smile appearing. But Mrs. Jackson's position at the Garland County Public Library shouldn't be jeopardized, Penny speculated. By Friday, Dennis still hadn't gotten the go-ahead for the federal savings and loan renovations. Ronnie was at home completing renovations when Charlotte called. What's this? What kind of scam? Charlotte yelled as Ronnie picked up. Oh, you have the documents, Ronnie remarked. What's the issue with the first-floor bathroom? You mentioned something needs fixing, but honestly, I can't figure out the problem, Ronnie asked. The lock is sticking, Charlotte replied. We'll need to discuss this when I get home, all right? No, we've already had that discussion. Talking hasn't helped, especially when you seem more inclined to heed Darlene over your own husband. So I'm done talking, Ronnie stated firmly. All right, I see what's going on. Got it. Goodbye. But I don't want a divorce, Charlotte lamented. And I don't want to be married to an unfaithful person, Ronnie shot back. Anything else? No. Goodbye then. Ronnie declined Charlotte's subsequent call. When John's number flashed on the screen, Ronnie set down his screwdriver and answered. Hello? Ronnie greeted. John erupted with a mix of frustrated sounds and exclamations. Ronnie was surprised at the range of swear words he could discern as his father-in-law pressed for details about Ronnie and Charlotte. It's pretty straightforward, sir, Ronnie began. Darlene and her spouse practice an open marriage, and they influenced Charlotte to consider it too. I made it clear I'm not interested in that. Amidst another emotional outburst from John, Ronnie continued. Your daughter gave me an ultimatum last night, accept it or divorce. So, I chose divorce. John attempted to argue further, even resorting to emotional manipulation. Sir, I appreciate your concern, Ronnie fibbed. But with 3 sons and a daughter, This issue should be handled by them, not me. Besides, why would I want a business that's been losing money for 3 years? Ronnie muttered to himself. Charlotte returned home with reinforcements. Ronnie anticipated this and remained silent as Darlene and Gary voiced their perspectives. You see, Ronnie, since we're secure in our marriage, Gary smirked, Darlene can maintain friendships outside of it. I mean, as long as she returns to me, right? Darlene added. And we share everything. No secrets. It's brought us closer. Well, that certainly brings clarity, Ronnie remarked. Charlotte, Darlene, and Gary smiled in response. Actually, Ronnie corrected, rising from the couch, after our divorce, Charlotte, feel free to share your life and inner world with whomever you choose. Oh, what's this? Gary smirked. So just because you feel inadequate, Charlotte should suppress her own talents and desires? Ronnie flashed a grin, revealing all his teeth. He then strolled to the living room exit, facing the stairs. If believing that makes you feel better, go right ahead, Ronnie said, departing the room once more. That night, Charlotte attempted to initiate closeness. Rest up, Charlotte. You've got a busy day ahead, don't you? Ronnie said with a grin. As was his routine, Ronnie woke at 5:30 and left the bed. He no longer concerned himself with closing their bedroom door, indifferent to whether his early movements disturbed Charlotte. Descending the stairs, he brewed coffee, sipped it while perusing the news on his phone, and found himself scoffing at national headlines. These politicians really should live by their own standards. Lifetime perks? Forget it. Try living on Social Security. Private health care? Nope. Here's the same insurance they've mandated for everyone else. At 11, Gary knocked on the door. Ronnie answered, and Gary attempted to enter. Ronnie's firm hand halted Gary's eager advance. What's up? Ronnie inquired. I'm here to pick up Charlotte for the airport, Gary explained, making another attempt to enter. I'll inform her you're here, Ronnie said, nudging Gary back and shutting the door, returning to his recorded sitcom. Shortly after, Charlotte descended the stairs with her suitcase. Why didn't you tell me Gary and Darlene were waiting outside? She demanded of Ronnie. Oh, right. Gary and Darlene are here, Ronnie replied, refocusing on his show. Seriously? Must you act so immaturely? Charlotte exclaimed. As she leaned in towards Ronnie, he sidestepped, leaving her to kiss the empty air. We'll discuss this when I return, Charlotte stated. No, we won't be doing that, Ronnie responded. After watching his sitcom and enjoying a satisfying meal, Ronnie finished his tasks by painting the front door a pale yellow. It complemented the house's red brick exterior beautifully. He chuckled when their cat, Samson, meowed from the garage. Samson was well provided for with food, water, and a clean litter box. I'll let you out once the paint dries, buddy, Ronnie assured the cat. Upstairs, he canceled their shared credit cards. He wasn't aware of any cards Charlotte had separately and had no intention of supporting her indiscretions or her cousin's lavish lifestyle. He accessed Charlotte's personal bank account and withdrew half the balance. Similarly, he withdrew half from their joint account, from which he was the sole contributor. Utilizing the bank's website, he opened a new account solely in his name and transferred the withdrawn funds there. Online services facilitated the removal of his name from utilities and cable TV. He shrugged off an email from Garland County Power and Light, stating the cancellation would occur at the billing cycle's end. Doesn't matter, Ronnie commented to the screen. Time for Sloan's Pizza, Ronnie thought as his stomach rumbled. Charlotte never let me eat there. Maybe I'll drop dead from a heart attack. He ordered pizza and a draft beer. He flirted with the waitress, even though she was significantly overweight. She smiled, tapping his wedding ring with her long nail. Ronnie glanced at the ring, his mood souring. He thanked her, left a tip in his truck, and departed. After considerable effort, Ronnie removed the ring, placing it in the console cup holder. Forever love, huh, Charlotte? He mused aloud. Guess that ended today. His truck signaled low fuel. At the gas station, he initially chose $10 worth, but decided to fill the tank completely. Filling 22 gallons sure takes time, Ronnie commented as the pump continued to gurgle. He visited a nearby convenience store and found Budweiser beer. While walking past another set of refrigerators, he noticed containers of ice cream. He picked up a pint of strawberry ice cream and brought both items to the counter. Shelley was no longer working there. She had gotten married, much to the disappointment of Ronnie and many other men who frequented that gas station, just to see her behind the counter. However, Shannon Carlisle, a petite brunette now working there, was almost as attractive as Shelley. Ronnie grinned as Shannon stepped onto a milk crate she had placed by the cash register. On a previous occasion, he had asked her height, to which she sharply responded, "I'm 4 feet 8 inches tall." "How short are you?" Ronnie quipped. Her eyes widened momentarily, then she burst into hearty laughter, brightening her already pretty face. From then on, she affectionately referred to Ronnie as Shorty. "Your wife out of town, Shorty?" Shannon inquired, observing his purchases. "My wife is gone for good," Ronnie replied. Shannon glanced at Ronnie's left hand, then met his eyes. After studying his face briefly, she asked, "So where are you taking me on our first date?" Brushing her thick brown hair back with her hand. "Shannon, as lovely as you are, why would you want to date an old guy like me?" Ronnie questioned. "That's about 7 inches," Shannon remarked, bagging Ronnie's items. Charlotte's 40th birthday was on Tuesday. On Wednesday, their daughter Tracy called Ronnie. "Eckley's renovation and remodeling," Ronnie answered. "Dad, yesterday was Mom's birthday," Tracy informed him. "Yeah, so?" Ronnie responded, scratching his stubbled face. "Why didn't you call her?" Tracy pressed. "I didn't want this," Ronnie sighed. "I just didn't, kiddo." "Why?" Tracy persisted. "You'll understand soon," Ronnie replied. "Your mother believes that now that she's 40, she should be with other men." "What?" Tracy exclaimed. "What do they teach you in school?" Ronnie retorted. "She's married. Married women don't date other men," Tracy clarified. "Oh, that's so old-fashioned," Tracy laughed. "Goodbye, Tracy," Ronnie said, ending the call. 10 minutes later, Charlotte's number appeared on Ronnie's phone. Despite recognizing the caller, he answered, "Eckley's renovation and remodeling." "Hi, Ronnie," Charlotte greeted firmly. "So, how's being a 40-year-old?" Ronnie quipped. "This isn't a joke, Ronnie," Charlotte snapped. "I agree, it's not funny," Ronnie conceded. "And thanks for canceling the credit cards," Charlotte added. "You're welcome," Ronnie responded. "Anything else?" "My birthday was yesterday," Charlotte mentioned. "Why didn't you call?" Ronnie questioned. "I didn't want this. Maybe whoever you're with would have wished you," Ronnie suggested. "Grow up, Ronnie," Charlotte retorted. "Really, Charlotte? Adults honor their commitments and respect their vows," Ronnie stated. "Who's Melissa Kalick?" Charlotte inquired. "Remember Melissa Strom? She married Lucy Kalick, the bank manager," Ronnie clarified. "Regardless, she's employed at Gold Standard Real Estate now. I've got this adorable redhead. She's as charming as can be. On the bright side, she believes she can quickly find a buyer for our house," Ronnie shared. "Buyer? Ronnie, we aren't selling the house," Charlotte exclaimed over the phone. "Can you really afford to surprise me like this? We have to settle the second mortgage, as Melissa informed me. She might find a buyer, but will likely need to bring cash to clear that mortgage," Ronnie replied. "We're not selling the house," Charlotte reiterated loudly. "I've stored all your furniture at the EZ warehouse on Independence Road, next to Chevrolet Place," Ronnie added. "Unit 212. Your dad has the key." "Oh, Lord, Ronnie, I need to get home." Charlotte's voice was filled with distress. "Your dad couldn't fetch Samson, so I took him to Dennis's," Ronnie continued. "Dennis? Oh, God, Dennis has those Dobermans," Charlotte exclaimed in terror. Shoot, I didn't consider that," Ronnie chuckled. "No wonder he was keen on adopting that cat." Ignoring his wife's pleas, Ronnie ended the call. Leaving the phone on the kitchen counter, he headed upstairs to surf the internet. He heard his cell phone ring, but chose to ignore it. "And maybe your mom's new boyfriend can cover his final school year," Ronnie muttered. "Why don't you check for a scholarship for students with a GPA of 2.1? Because with that attitude, it's tough to expect your dad to finance your education," he retorted. After shutting down the computer, Ronnie shaved, removing 3 days of stubble carefully. He then took a hot shower, got dressed in jeans and a t-shirt. The computer was in the pickup truck's cab, behind the passenger seat. As his final act, Ronnie discarded his cell phone in the trash and wheeled the trash can to the curb. "Going to miss you," Herman Vogart, a neighbor, greeted Ronnie on the street. "Vogart, you won't do this," Ronnie laughed, shaking Herman's hand. "The most we spoke was when you griped about Tracy's boys blasting their music. It's tough getting neighbors to give you space." "Ah, man," Herman sighed. "You were the ideal neighbor. Never borrowed stuff, never asked me to feed your cat or collect your mail during vacations. I bet the next folks will be all over me." "You brought it on yourself being so friendly," Ronnie remarked. "The trash can's ringing," Herman pointed out. "Mind your business. It's probably some critter," Ronnie smirked, shaking Herman's hand again. Charlotte tried unlocking the front door, but found her key didn't fit. She pulled out her phone, dialed the number for Gold Standard Real Estate listed on the sign, and stared at it in disbelief. Her phone was fully charged, but it seemed faulty. Darlene lent Charlotte her cell, while Gary checked the house's windows and doors. Charlotte whispered curses when the call connected. "Gold Standard Real Estate, Melissa Kalick speaking," Melissa greeted cheerfully. "This is Charlotte Jackson," Charlotte snapped. "My key doesn't work at my house." "Ah, Ronald Jackson's ex?" Melissa chirped. "Ex? Ex?" Charlotte retorted. "I need to sign some paperwork," Melissa continued. "Guess what? I have clients interested in your home." "It's not for sale," Charlotte exclaimed. "So, are you buying out Mr. Jackson?" Melissa probed. "The Richmonds might be disappointed. They liked the Purcell house, too." Gary returned, confirming the house was secure. Charlotte reiterated the house wasn't for sale and called Ronnie. "You idiot," Charlotte muttered as Ronnie's voice answered, "Eccles Renovations and Remodeling." "Can we drop you somewhere?" Gary interrupted, growing impatient. "My cat," Charlotte remembered, squeezing back into the car. "Hey," Dennis answered. "It's me," Ronnie said. "He gave Samson to you?" Charlotte asked. "With poppy, olive oil, and Blue Tool around? They'd shred that cat," Dennis snapped. "No, Dad has him. You need to get him. Dad's physical therapist is allergic." "Thank goodness," Charlotte sighed. "Thanks," Dennis continued. "Ronnie's disappearance almost bankrupted us. I secured a federal loan but had to let Framonte take it because none of us can lay ceramic tile." "Uh-huh," Charlotte interrupted. "Who else are you calling?" Darlene snapped as Charlotte dialed her dad's number. "Don't you have unlimited?" Charlotte asked. "Nope, 1,000 minutes monthly. Mr. Football used most," Darlene replied. "Last call," Charlotte assured. John angrily agreed to let her come over. Gary drove them to John Eccles' house. Darlene and Charlotte hugged, and Charlotte headed inside. "How was it?" Gary asked Darlene as she got in the car. "Disastrous," Darlene sighed. "Who'd want her?" "Not with you around," Gary joked, watching Charlotte enter. "Any money from her?" Darlene inquired. "Almost," Gary said, pulling out. "Ronnie's such a pain." "Can you hear me?" Darlene sounded frustrated. "He canceled her credit cards. She used her debit," Gary explained. "ATMs are everywhere," Darlene pointed out. "She got about $10, Gary muttered. "We need gas," Darlene stated. "With ATMs and the internet, she's fine," Gary reasoned. "Unless your football-obsessed hubby isn't hogging minutes," Darlene retorted. "Here's $20, Gary handed Darlene. "She went online," Darlene concluded. "What's the connection to ATMs?" Gary inquired as he steered into the gas station. Charlotte noticed Ronnie covered half her bill. "Just grab $10, all right? We still have the electricity bill to cover unless you've settled it already," Darlene suggested. Gary nodded and entered the adjoining convenience store. Darlene observed Gary glance at the beer cooler and then honk the car horn. Gary shot her a disapproving look through the store's window, but proceeded to the counter. "I was only getting one can," Gary claimed upon his return. "Just one?" Darlene retorted. "When was the last time you settled for just one can?" Gary mumbled. "Hey, isn't that petite lady new here? How come she has such prominent chest?" Gary commented. "She's petite, so her chest seemed larger in comparison," Darlene corrected. "Let's get that gas," Gary urged. "Fine," Darlene responded reluctantly. Amidst their argument, Charlotte endured her father's furious monologue. Since his stroke, John's language has become increasingly crude, and he didn't shy away from using derogatory and harmful words to describe those around him. "When was the last time you looked in the mirror?" John questioned. "Fat pig. That face looks like it was doused and saved with an ice pick," John went on. "Dad," Charlotte exclaimed, deeply hurt. "Turning 40? So what? Women hit 40 every day," John grumbled. "But not all betray their family at 40. John gestured towards legal documents on the coffee table. Just then, Samson entered the room. "You'll need a lawyer, and I have to clean that cat litter box," John snapped. "Good Lord. I don't know what that animal eats, but it stinks to high heaven," John muttered. "You're back in your old room," John said tersely. "I hope betraying us was worth it. Do you hear me? I hope it was. 40 years old and still making foolish choices." Later that night, lying in her childhood bed, Charlotte gazed at the wallpaper she and her mother had chosen when she was 8. Samson remained still as Charlotte switched off the light, staring into the darkness. The week of her 40th birthday had begun on a high note. The flight to Vegas was smooth, Charlotte recalled, watching the city lights emerge below. After checking into their hotel, Charlotte and Darlene tried their luck at the roulette table before opting for dinner. Charlotte felt humiliated when a waiter informed her credit card was declined. The second met the same fate. The manager brought out her third card with a stern expression. Charlotte tried her debit card, which thankfully went through. Upon checking her bank, she discovered her balance had been halved. Both she and Darlene blamed Ronnie Jackson, feeling he had overstepped. Way overstepped. "Come on, Darlene," Darlene urged. "We're in Vegas. We can't let this setback spoil our fun, right?" However, watching Darlene lose $300 at the blackjack table dimmed the evening's excitement a bit. "That was Charlotte's $300, Darlene muttered. Charlotte struck up a conversation with a handsome young man at a bar, 25-year-old David Daltrey, and they headed to her room. "It was a brief 4 minutes, Charlotte," Darlene quipped. Charlotte caught David attempting to snatch her wallet from her purse. Darlene lamented her $100 daily limit. "Lady Luck wasn't on Darlene's side this trip," Charlotte joked. "Darlene's $100 seemed to vanish as soon as she left the hotel room." "On Tuesday evening, my birthday, I approached another young man," Charlotte remembered. He smirked and said, "Lady, if I wanted closeness with a 300-pound woman, I'd be home with my wife." He then suggested a blind convention nearby, mocking my appearance. Feeling hurt, Charlotte took the elevator to their room. Seeing the "Do Not Disturb" sign, she groaned and spent hours in the lobby coffee shop. Eventually, she messaged Darlene about returning. Back in her room after a shower, Charlotte wore hot lingerie and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She noticed Ronnie hadn't called or texted for her birthday. Tracy didn't call either, but sent a birthday text. Checking her phone, Charlotte felt the sting of her husband's neglect. Yet she appreciated birthday wishes from Dennis, Brian, and Paul. The next morning, Darlene grumbled about the budget, hinting she paid for their flight and hotel. By Saturday, Charlotte contemplated ending her relationship with Darlene due to her constant complaints. But with Darlene holding their airline tickets, Charlotte stayed quiet. Now in her childhood room, Charlotte sighed deeply. Her birthday month was far from a celebration. Jim Runkles, recommended by Freddie Baxter from the Garland County Public Library, reviewed the papers from Penny Barnes's office. He then delivered a blunt assessment. "He gets half, you get half. The house must be sold, with profits split evenly. Expenses are shared. Despite his unemployment, he isn't seeking child support," Jim stated. "But I don't want a divorce," Charlotte protested. "I don't want to lose my home. I don't want to miss Jackson." "It doesn't change the facts," Jim responded. "One person wants a divorce, and that can lead to it." "Can we get a consultation?" Charlotte asked. "We can request one," Jim confirmed, and Charlotte smiled. "I'll call Penny's office." Listening to Jim, Charlotte glanced at his book titles, hearing mostly "uh-huh" and from him. "All right, Mrs. Jackson, here's the issue," Jim stated, setting his phone on the table. "I'm paying you to avoid issues," Charlotte responded, gripping her purse firmly. "Miss Barnes doesn't know where her client is. Your husband came, settled her fee, and departed," Jim relayed. "She only possesses his email address." "Is that essential?" "It's her sole means to reach him. And no, she won't disclose the email. It's protected by attorney-client privilege," Jim clarified. "Oh," Charlotte murmured, settling back in her chair. "Ronnie informed Miss Barnes that henceforth your daughter will cover her tuition and dorm costs," Jim added. He mentioned something about initiating new traditions. "Do you grasp what he's implying?" Charlotte inquired. "No," Charlotte whispered, "but I suspect Tracy might." Charlotte bypassed her 41st birthday, dressing for work and leaving her room. John remained absorbed, hands limp on his lap, when his daughter planted a kiss on his cheek. "Anything you need before I head out?" Charlotte queried. "No," John mumbled. "All right, I'll depart. Take care of Samson, all right?" Charlotte endeavored to inject cheer into her voice. "Everything's fine. My 2 main guys will be good. Got it?" John responded, his words interspersed with grunts and barks. Charlotte commuted to work, following her familiar route from her dad's residence to the library. Her phone buzzed, but she waited until parking to check. "Happy birthday," flashed on her screen. "Thanks, Tracy," Charlotte responded flatly. "Thrilled for my birthday, just brimming with joy." Still, she acknowledged Tracy's greeting. Despite shedding 25 pounds since turning 40, Charlotte's transformation went unnoticed. She felt overlooked since Ronnie's departure. Shortly after Ronnie exited, Charlotte discerned the nature of Darlene and Gary's open marriage. Financial constraints bound them, leading to a loveless coexistence in a trailer as mere roommates. Darlene and Gary lacked affectionate gestures. Charlotte recalled Ronnie's warmth and kisses, especially after she cooked him a meal. However, after announcing her solo Vegas trip for her 40th, Ronnie's affection waned. Their last encounter ended with Ronnie evading her kiss. An hour post Tracy's text, Charlotte's phone rang. Reading a message from her boss questioning her tardiness, she disembarked from her car, dazed, and approached her workplace's rear entrance. Tracy received a thank you text from her mom for the birthday wishes, followed by a picture of a brown-haired little girl gazing back at her. Antoinette Barbara Jackson, weighing 6 pounds, 4 ounces, and measuring 17 inches, checked a text from her father's phone. Tracy found it ironic that her mom and younger sister shared a birthday. She doubted her mom would see the humor, or if her dad even remembered. "Is this Shannon Parquet? Becky McMahon here," a brunette stated over the phone. "We offer carpets, tiles, hardwoods, and laminate flooring." "Hey, Shorty," a voice teased on the line. "Pardon me," Ronnie Jackson told a couple choosing hardwood floor colors. He signaled Bobby to assist them and picked up the call. The man nodded and approached the couple. Ronnie moved to the wall phone and answered the blinking line. Scanning the trading floor, he listened attentively. He awaited news from Samuel D. about securing an exclusive flooring contract for the developer's projects. "Listening, Shorty," Ronnie greeted. "Guess what, Mr. Shorty?" Shannon's voice teased. "Looks like you and your 7 inches are making me a mom again." "Shannon, really?" Ronnie exclaimed in surprise. "Tony's still in diapers and we're expecting another?" Shannon giggled on the other end. "Where are you?" Ronnie asked. "Just left Dr. Pruitt's," Shannon replied. "Hurry over," Ronnie urged. "We're celebrating at the Stone Grill. All this talk about my figure is why we're in this situation," Shannon chuckled, pushing Tony's stroller from Alliance Square Medical Center into the Texas heat. At 4'8", she brushed her hair back and scanned her surroundings, always cautious due to her height. She faced the sun and smiled. When Ronnie told Shannon Carlisle he was leaving the gas station, she questioned his destination. Ronnie paused. "Why?" he asked. "So I can forward my last paycheck," Shannon quipped, stepping off her milk crate. "Heading somewhere warm? I'm already snowed in." "Shannon, what's a stunning girl like you doing with an old guy like me?" Ronnie teased. Ready to banter back, Shannon replied, "About 7 inches." Closing her eyes, she asked, "What color are my eyes?" "Dark brown," Ronnie answered. "I have a dimple." "On which side?" she queried, opening her eyes. "Left," he responded. "And when you smile, your right front tooth peeks out, slightly crooked," he added. "Why say goodbye?" Shannon questioned, moving from the counter. "Polly, I'm leaving." "I'm not sure," Ronnie said as Polly, hauling his 312 pounds, exited the warehouse. "Sure," Shannon grinned, taking Ronnie's hand. "Polly, I'm out." 2 hours left," Polly protested. "Feeling sick?" Shannon claimed. "Goodbye." "Ever been to Texas?" Outside Alliance Square Medical Center, Shannon whispered, "Ronnie, I love you." Growing up, I was surrounded by the whispers of betrayal and heartbreak. My father's indiscretions weren't just family secrets. They were open wounds in our household. His frequent absences, unexplained late nights, and the smell of cheap perfume on his shirts were a stark contrast to my mother's unwavering devotion. I often wondered why she stayed, why she endured the humiliation. As a child, I believed in the sanctity of love, thinking it was something magical that could weather any storm. But the cracks in their marriage taught me otherwise. They revealed a harsh reality where trust was fragile and love could be weaponized. I promised myself my life would be different. When I met Jody in high school, I saw in her what I hoped for: kindness, loyalty, and a sense of shared purpose. We built our relationship on what I thought was a foundation of mutual respect and transparency. From the day we exchanged vows, I envisioned a future free of the chaos and pain I grew up with. I was determined to provide her with the stability my parents never had. Yet, even the strongest foundation can be undermined, and as I would soon learn, illusions of security are no match for the unpredictable storms of life. The night my wife, Jody, decided to spend it in the company of another man wasn't just another evening. It marked the end of an era in my life. She assumed I would take it in stride, that her pursuit of a fleeting thrill wouldn't matter to me. Perhaps she was correct about her excitement, but she miscalculated how deeply it would cut. What she saw as a harmless adventure, I saw as a betrayal that unraveled the very fabric of our marriage. I was at my desk, sipping coffee, thinking about the morning with Jody. We met in high school and mostly dated each other, though we briefly dated other people during disagreements, always coming back to one another. We gave each other our pureness before prom and married 9 months after graduation. As far as I knew, I was her only partner. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, so I hesitated. I hate scam calls, especially the ones from the IRS. But this time it was Jody's office number. "Hi, honey," I answered. A man's voice responded, sharp and formal. "This isn't your wife, Mr. Taylor." I blinked, confused. "That's me, John Richard Taylor III, but I go by Trey." The man introduced himself. "I'm Michael Hamilton, a colleague of Jody's. I need you to meet me this afternoon." His tone didn't explain much beyond that. I felt a sudden rush of concern. "Is she okay?" "She was fine when I last saw her," Michael replied. "But I have some information about her that I think you should know. Can you meet me at noon?" He wouldn't explain over the phone. I agreed reluctantly, still unsure if this was some kind of joke. At noon, I met Michael outside Spike's restaurant. He suggested we walk to avoid being overheard, so we headed toward Central Park. "Your wife has been spending a lot of time with a man named Stan Morrison at work," he started. "They go to lunch together every day, and today they were openly discussing their plans for tomorrow night. Dinner at the Hilton, followed by dancing, and then spending the night together." My stomach sank. "Are you telling me they're sleeping together?" "Yes," Michael confirmed. "He's already made reservations, and your wife is out shopping for clothes for the date." I felt numb. "How do they think this will work?" "She thinks you love her enough to let her experience another man," he said. "She believes it won't affect your marriage." I stopped walking, trying to process everything. "Why are you telling me this?" Michael's expression hardened. "I was married for 9 years. My wife had an affair and the legal system screwed me over. Now I'm trying to help someone avoid my situation." We talked for a while longer before he left. I was left thinking about my marriage and what the future held. If Michael was telling the truth, my marriage was over. It scared me how easily I could consider that possibility based on a brief conversation with a stranger. I thought back to my childhood and the pain my mother endured with my father. He was a heavy drinker and womanizer, having multiple affairs and openly mocking her. When I asked why she put up with it, she simply said, "I love him." One day, when I was about 11, my dad took me to his girlfriend's house. I ended up walking home after getting bored of petting her dog. When I told my mom where I had been, she didn't confront him, but 2 days later he spanked me with a belt for breaking a plate. Looking back, I realized it was because I had snitched on him. After seeing how my mother suffered, I couldn't imagine condoning Jody having an affair. Even thinking about it made me sick. Call me whatever you want, but I wasn't going to live through what my mother did. Eventually she left my father, and life got better for both of us. She remarried and is happy now. Jody and I live in a house owned by my mother and stepfather, so I was stuck wondering, confront her or ignore it? Wait and see? As a salesman, I knew I had to be proactive, not wait for things to come to me. But in this case, if Michael was right, I didn't know Jody at all. She knew how I felt about infidelity, so I decided to take action. But how do you act when you don't even know if the situation is real? I planned out every possible scenario. I imagined the worst-case outcome and asked myself what I could live with. If I couldn't accept the worst, I would have to make another choice. I made up my mind. First, I found a private investigator. After a quick meeting and spending a lot of money, we had a plan in place. Now I had to figure out how to act when I got home. When I arrived, Jody was there. She kissed and hugged me like she always did, and I had to decide how to respond. I could act normal, which would allow her plans to proceed, or I could drop a hint about what I'd learned. But if I did that, she might just deny everything and wait for things to blow over. I wasn't going to live with that doubt. On the other hand, if I acted suspicious, she might abandon her plan. I decided to act normal. We had dinner, and I fried the pork chops like usual. Acting normal was harder than I expected, but either she was a great actress or, as Michael said, she was so confident that she didn't even try to hide anything. Around 11 p.m., I went upstairs to get ready for bed. Jody was already asleep. I showered, then lay awake, unable to sleep. At 6 a.m., she got up, dressed, and went downstairs. A few minutes later, I did the same, only to find she was already gone. We rarely left the house without kissing each other goodbye, but today was different. It was Friday, usually a good day for RV sales, but I decided to take the day off. I called my boss, then contacted the dealership's attorney to ask for a divorce lawyer recommendation. He referred me to his wife, but warned me she didn't take cases from husbands who cheated. After he called her, I met with the lawyer. I explained my conversation with Michael Hamilton. She asked why I'd hired an investigator based on an unverified story from a stranger. I told her about my parents' marriage and my personal stance against infidelity. She suggested I wait and confirm Hamilton's story, adding that if Jody was as confident as he said, then she'd have nothing to lose by having an affair. I told her that I wouldn't tolerate any affair, big or small, and if Jody went through with her plan, I wanted her served by Monday. If Hamilton's lying, I'll have to eat crow, I said, but if he's telling the truth, I'll be ready. She assured me the paperwork would be ready if needed. By 1 p.m., I was back at work trying to sell a van to an elderly couple. At first, I was doubtful about selling a 45-foot motorhome to them, but after spending time with them, I realized they were in great shape and had a lively, loving relationship. I envied their energy and bond, hoping Jody and I could be like them one day. They picked out their van, and we took it for a test drive. Mr. Jacobson drove confidently, and I could barely focus on the sale, enjoying their conversation. It made me think of how I wanted my own marriage to turn out. I decided to give them a tray discount, taking a bit from my commission. They bought the van, smiling as they left. It was time to head home. I checked in with my investigator and was reassured everything was set. At 5:30 p.m., I pulled into the garage. Jody's car was in its spot, and the house was quiet, no dinner cooking. I stayed calm, placed the package from the investigator on the mantel, and sat down to wait. At 5:45, Jody came downstairs, looking stunning in the outfit Michael had described. She had her overnight bag in hand. "Wow, you look gorgeous. What's the occasion?" I asked, trying to hide the knot forming in my stomach. "One of the guys at work has been asking me out, and I thought it'd be fun," she replied casually. "What do you mean, go out with him? Like a date?" I pressed, the confusion creeping into my voice. "Yes," she said, not missing a beat. "We thought since you're the only man I've ever been with. I'd like to sleep with someone else. We're going to dinner, then dancing, and spending the night at a hotel." I felt the blood drain from my face. I couldn't believe how calm she was. "You can't be serious. You're really spending the night with another man? I'm not agreeing to that." "And who's this we are talking about?" I demanded, struggling to make sense of it. "It's no big deal," she said dismissively. "Just one night of fun. I'll be back tomorrow, and it'll be like nothing happened. I might even pick up a few tricks you might like." "There's no way I'm letting you go out tonight with someone else," I said firmly, my voice tight with anger. "Don't be ridiculous," she shot back. "I'm serious, Jody. If you go, our marriage is over," I said, each word heavy with finality. Just then, we heard a car honk from outside. "That's him," she said, heading toward the door. I moved quickly, blocking her path. "Please, don't do this," I said, my voice pleading as I reached out. "I have to go," she replied, stepping around me and kissing me on the cheek. "I'll be home by noon tomorrow, and everything will be fine," she said, already heading for the door. "If you leave, you won't have anywhere to come back to," I warned, my heart sinking with the words. "Now you're being really stupid," she said, rolling her eyes. "Enjoy your night thinking about how much fun I'm having. We'll talk tomorrow. Good night." She kissed me and left. I didn't watch her get into the car. I walked over to the fireplace, turned off the recorder, and carried the box of trash bags upstairs. It took me nearly 2 hours to remove every trace of her. I emptied her closet and bathroom vanity, even taking her birth certificate, high school diploma, and social security card from the safe. I set everything by the garage door and gathered up her family photo albums, school awards, and the Remington bronze statue from her grandfather. I cleared out all her magnets from the fridge, stuffed everything in her car, rolled it out of the garage, and parked it on the street, leaving the keys on the driver's seat. I climbed into bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and turned for hours. Finally, I got up, made coffee, and tried watching a Hogan's Heroes marathon, but it didn't help. For the next 2 days, I couldn't sleep at all. I felt like a zombie. By 11 a.m. on the third day, I'd finished a sale with the Jacobsons, wrapping up all the paperwork. I was home by 11:45, and the locksmith had already delivered a new set of keys. The investigator was there too, handing over the video footage he'd recorded over the past 18 hours. At 12:30, I was sitting in front of the TV, watching the tapes when I heard the doorbell. I opened the door to find Jody standing there. "Hey, my key doesn't work, and why is my car outside?" she asked. I blocked the door. "Your key doesn't work because you don't live here anymore, and your car's outside because I don't want it in my garage." "What are you talking about? This is my house now," she demanded, trying to push past me. I said, "I told you last night. If you got in that man's car, you wouldn't have a place to come back to. All your stuff's in your car." "You can't be serious," she said, clearly shocked. "It was just," she started, but I didn't let her finish. I slammed the door in her face. She pounded on the door, so I opened it again. "If you don't stop banging, I'll call the police and have you arrested," I threatened, though I knew I probably couldn't do that. But I had nothing left to lose. "You can't do that! This is my house!" she yelled. "This house belongs to my mother and stepfather," I replied, "and they've decided you don't live here anymore. Now leave!" She stood there, speechless, and I slammed the door in her face again. I went back to watching the tapes, but the anger inside me kept building. After a while, I glanced out the window and saw Jody sitting in her car. I went to the kitchen for water, but poured myself a gin and tonic instead, my frustration growing. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't just a ring. It was constant, relentless. I was ready to snap. I imagined tearing into her and feeding the pieces to the dogs. I opened the door and there stood her sister Judy, still pressing the doorbell. "Jody's crying at my house. I want to know why," she said. I didn't care. Screw it, I thought, and slammed the door in her face. But the bell rang again, and this time I yanked the door open and slammed her hand against it, causing her to nearly lose her balance. "Ring that bell one more time, and I'll break your fingers one at a time," I warned. Judy pushed against the door, holding it open. "Talk to me, please." I stood there for a moment before slowly opening the door and letting her in. She looked at me. "I thought you loved Jody. I can't believe you kicked her out over a stupid disagreement." "Stupid disagreement?" I scoffed. "She told me you had a fight over a walk and that you kicked her out." Judy sighed. "Well, that part's true. She wanted to go out and I didn't. But she didn't tell you she wanted to go out with a guy from work, did she?" I shook my head. "Did she tell you they were planning dinner, dancing, and then a hotel room?" I didn't wait for an answer, just played the audio tape I'd made the night before. Judy listened, her face falling. "I had no idea," she said, shaking her head. "Yeah, neither did I replied flatly. "So what are you going to do?" she asked softly. "Divorce her?" she added, almost as an afterthought. "No," I said bitterly. "This marriage is over." Judy nodded, then stood up. I walked her to the door. She hesitated, looking at me, and I opened it, escorting her out. The rest of the evening and all of Sunday, I did nothing but eat grilled cheese sandwiches and drink gin and tonics. Self-pity had taken over. Then there was another knock at the door. Judy again. "You said if I rang the bell one more time, you'd break my fingers, so I knocked," she said. "I've been talking to Jody all day. What you told me is true." I let her in, motioning for her to sit down. "So what's the deal?" "She says nothing happened," I asked. Judy nodded. "She admitted it was a disaster. They went to the hotel, drank too much, passed out. She woke up, realized what she was doing, and insisted he take her home." "Well, that's a story," I muttered, still not buying it. "You believe her, don't you?" Judy asked. "I believe she and this guy spent days, maybe weeks, planning it. They spent time together, talked, grew close. He knows more about my marriage than I do. They planned to cheat, and it doesn't matter if nothing happened. That's a betrayal." Judy was silent. "You don't believe her, do you?" she asked. "No," I replied firmly. "Even if nothing happened, you're not going to forgive her?" she pressed. "Not in this lifetime," I said. We reached the door and she paused. "When this is over, can we still be friends?" I took a deep breath. "Jody and I are getting a divorce. If she fights it, it'll get ugly. By the time it's over, you probably won't want to be friends with me anymore." She smiled faintly. "I see. Well, I think I'll miss you." She placed a hand on my cheek and kissed my other cheek softly, then left, closing the door behind her. Since Saturday, my phone had been off most of the time. Jody tried reaching me repeatedly, but eventually gave up. I managed to speak to her father, who tried to convince me that since nothing physical had happened with Stan, it wasn't a big deal and I should move on. I explained it to him the same way I had to Judy. After the call, he realized divorce was inevitable and sighed before hanging up. On Monday, I called my attorney and told her about the weekend's events. I also instructed her to serve Jody with a summons that day. My attorney assured me it would be done by the end of the day. I spent the rest of the day not remembering much. Around 4 p.m., my phone rang. I saw it was Jody's office number and decided to answer. "Hello?" I said. "Good afternoon, Mr. Taylor. This is Michael Hamilton. I thought you might want to know that there was some excitement here today," he said. "Really?" I asked, curious. "Yes. Your wife was served with a summons, and after reading the papers, she fainted. An ambulance took her to the hospital. When the paramedics left, Stan Morrison picked up the papers, looked them over, and almost fainted too." As serious as the situation was, part of me found it darkly amusing, but I had no sympathy for either of them. "I'll keep you posted on any developments," Michael said. "Please do," I replied before hanging up. A moment later, my phone rang again. It was Judy. "Hello?" I answered, "Jody's in the hospital," she said. "So?" I replied coldly. "I just thought you might want to know." "I didn't ask," I added more sharply than I intended. "Are you really that heartless?" Judy asked. "My coldness comes from your sister," I answered. "I warned you this would go south. This is just round one." The following weeks played out predictably. Jody tried to talk to me countless times, but I ignored her. Her parents urged me to listen, but I refused. My mother spent a lot of time trying to comfort me, but I insisted I was fine, though she didn't believe it. Michael Hamilton called daily, and I enjoyed his calls. He was the only one who knew what was going on with Morrison. Jody came to work but just sat at her desk, only meeting with her lawyer. She and Morrison barely spoke, at least not in front of anyone. Me? I was just stalling. Our lawyers set up a meeting. Jody, her lawyer, my lawyer, and me. It was the first time I'd seen her since I kicked her out. She looked thinner and worn out, and I was surprised to see Judy there. Jody's lawyer asked if everything was okay. "Are you sure you want to be here?" I asked Judy. "I'm here for Jody," she replied. "That's not what I asked," I said, staring at her. "But fine, stay." Jody was already sitting at the table, so we all took our seats. Her lawyer started, "Mrs. Taylor categorically denies the infidelity and asks for the divorce petition to be dismissed so they can work on saving the marriage. She's willing to go to counseling." My lawyer and I exchanged a glance before he spoke. If there was no infidelity, could Mrs. Taylor explain her actions that night? We all looked at Jody. "I'll be happy to," she said calmly. "A gentleman friend picked me up." "Does he have a name?" my lawyer asked. "Of course, but his name isn't important. Nothing bad happened, so no need to involve him." She repeated what Judy had told me. Champagne, dinner, more champagne, getting too drunk to have fun, passing out, and then coming home to be kicked out. "Poor misunderstanding," she sighed. "I made a mistake. I love my husband, and I want him to forgive me." I looked at Judy, who nodded in agreement. My lawyer, who had been quiet until now, asked, "Okay, let's assume everything you said is true, and no sex occurred. Was there any touching? Anything that wouldn't pass the husband test?" "Absolutely not," Jody insisted. Judy nodded. My lawyer glanced at me, and I glanced back. I picked up the remote, pressed play, and a screen dropped down from the ceiling, showing Jody walking to Stan Morrison's car in our driveway. He opened the door for her, and they kissed, long and passionately. Then they got in and drove off. I paused the video. "Lie number one," I said, looking around the room. Everyone sat up straighter. Jody turned pale, and Judy just stared at her sister. On Thursday, after Michael Hamilton's call, I spoke with my investigator. We planned to videotape Jody's every move on Friday night, starting when Stan Morrison arrived at our house. Thanks to Hamilton, we knew the location of their date and the room number they had booked. My investigator was able to get access to their suite before check-in. "You said there was no inappropriate touching, right?" I asked Jody. "Yes," she replied, though unsure. I pressed play. The video showed Jody and Morrison at the Hilton's restaurant, where his hand was on her rear. "Lie number two," I said. Jody looked around. Her lawyer was reading the divorce petition, and Judy was inspecting her nails. The video continued. Jody and Morrison ordered champagne, finished it, and rushed to the elevator. I had paid my investigator $1,000 to get into their suite before they checked in. 4 minutes after entering, Jody was already entertaining Morrison. Then, Jody screamed and ran out, followed by Judy. I paused the video. "Seems my client forgot some details," said Jody's lawyer, quickly packing up and leaving with the sisters. Later, I returned to the dealership, and Judy approached my booth. She paused for a moment before asking, "May I sit down?" "Sure," I replied, motioning to the chair across from me. We both sat in silence for a few moments. Finally, Judy broke the quiet. "You knew, didn't you?" "Knew what?" I asked, confused. "When I came to your house that Saturday," she continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "You already knew they were sleeping together." I sighed, a weight settling in. "Yes," I admitted. "I watched the video before you arrived." Judy's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. I pressed on. "And they weren't just fooling around, Judy. They were doing it. She's my wife, and she let it happen." A long pause followed, then she asked softly, "Why didn't you tell me?" "I thought she'd admitted herself," I said, the words coming out heavy. "I thought she'd agree to a divorce. If she had, I would have spared you and your family the details. I've always liked your parents." The room fell quiet again, the tension thick. My phone rang, breaking the silence. I answered immediately. "This is Michael Hamilton," came the voice on the other end. "Just so you know, your wife called yesterday and quit. She didn't even clear her desk." "Thanks," I said, my voice flat. "Let me know if you hear anything else." I hung up without another word. Judy opened her mouth to speak, but was interrupted by the office loudspeaker. "Trey, you have a call on line 6. I nodded to Judy before stepping away to take the call. It lasted about 15 minutes, during which Judy remained still, her gaze distant. When I returned, she looked at me with a certain finality. "She's gone, Trey." "What do you mean gone?" I asked. "She packed up and left. Probably moved into her own place," Judy said quietly. "I don't think so," Judy added. "She asked me to tell your parents she was sorry for disappointing them." "It wasn't just your parents she disappointed," I replied. "Yeah, we know," she said softly. Judy stood up, glanced at me, and walked out. Later that night, I watched the full video again. My lawyer still had the earlier copy, but I had my own. Watching it made me numb. There was no romance, no love. He didn't care about her feelings. The pain and anger swirled in me. Part of me wanted to scream in agony. Another part wanted revenge. My thoughts were a mess. I fell asleep in the chair, my mind swirling with thoughts of the betrayal. Over the following weeks, my lawyer tried to arrange another meeting with Jody and her lawyer, but he couldn't get in touch with her. A month passed, then another. I checked in with Judy and her parents. No one had heard from Jody. I thought about hiring a tracker, but my lawyer advised against it. I canceled the credit cards and took half the money. The records showed she hadn't used any of the remaining funds. If she stays gone long enough, we could file for desertion, but we'll see. Then the phone rang. "Trey Taylor," I answered. "Good morning, Mr. Taylor. It's Michael Hamilton. Do you remember me?" "Of course, Michael. How's everything going?" I replied, sitting up in the chair. "Not bad," he said. "I just wanted to update you on my situation. Remember my divorce?" "Yeah," I said. "Your ex was living with her boyfriend." "That's right," Michael confirmed. "Turns out the guy's a thief. He convinced my ex to steal from her company, and now they're both in jail." I chuckled. "Good for them." "Are you still at the same place?" Michael asked. "Yeah," I replied. "That's actually why I'm calling," he continued. "Since your wife left, things have been quiet. Stan Morrison's been keeping to himself, but lately some of his calls have been interesting." "Interesting how?" I asked, intrigued. "He was talking to your wife today." I frowned. "How do you know?" "I overheard him say, 'I miss you too, Jody,'" Michael said. I sat up straighter. "Did you hear where she is?" "I got her phone number after he talked to her," Michael explained. "He left his phone on the desk, so I grabbed it and wrote it down." "Nice work, Michael," I said, impressed. "Thanks," he replied. "Keep me posted if you hear anything else." I got the number, passed it to my attorney, and decided to make the call. The phone rang, and someone picked up. "Hello?" "Hi, Judy. It's Trey." "What do you need?" she asked, her tone flat. "Do you or anyone in your family know anyone in Florida?" I asked. "Why?" she responded, cautious. "Because I think Jody's there." "Why do you care?" Judy shot back. "I want a divorce, and she needs to sign the papers," I explained. "When are you going to ask her?" Judy replied, sounding uninterested. "I don't need to ask," I said. "My lawyer is already handling it, but it would save him some trouble." "She lives in Fort Lauderdale," Judy said almost reluctantly. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Why didn't you say anything before?" Over the next few days, Judy gave me Jody's address and confirmed that Jody knew the divorce papers were ready. I gave the address to my attorney, and he immediately sent them. Judy and I planned to have dinner and then watch the video at my house. She made it clear, though, that revenge wasn't on the table, and she wouldn't sleep with her brother-in-law. Thursday morning, Michael Hamilton called again. "Hey, Mr. Taylor, just a quick update. Stan Morrison quit his job today. No notice, just packed up and left. He told someone he's moving to Florida." "Interesting. Thanks, Michael," I said. "By the way, how's everything with you?" Michael asked. "My wife confessed to the theft and pled guilty," I replied. "She'll get a light sentence, but her boyfriend's looking at serious time." I laughed, and we chatted a little longer before I ended the call. I immediately dialed Judy's number. "How long have you known Stan Morrison was moving to Florida?" I asked when she picked up. There was a long silence on the other end. "Judy, how long?" I pressed. "A few days," she finally answered. "How many times have they seen each other since she moved in with him?" I continued. 4. She's been here twice, and he's been there twice." 4 times? I couldn't believe it. You knew she was still seeing him, and you were okay with that, after everything? Trey, she's my sister, Judy said quietly. I ended the call. Moments later, Judy called again, but I ignored it. I sat in my cubicle for a while, then walked over to the repair shop to talk to the mechanics. One of them, a friend of mine, was a retired Army vet. He'd lost part of his leg and fingers in Iraq, and he was one of the few who understood what I was going through. We sat outside, and I brought him up to speed. I could make sure they don't make it to Florida, he said. No, I replied. Neither one is worth going to jail over. I just want to be rid of her. I can make that happen too, he offered. I laughed. Nah, living with myself is punishment enough. We talked for a while longer, until I heard over the loudspeaker, Trey, call line 4. Back at my cubicle, I picked up the phone. Trey Taylor. Trey, please don't hang up. I hung up, walked over to the receptionist and said, no more calls today. I'm going home. When I turned onto my street, I saw Judy's car parked in front of my house. I pulled into the driveway, and by the time I reached the garage, she was already at the front door knocking. She remembered my threat about the doorbell, so I entered through the garage and made my way to the kitchen. She kept knocking, so I decided to answer. You're not welcome here, I said as I opened the door. Listen, she started. I shut the door in her face, this time without slamming it. I heated up some spaghetti and meatballs, then went to my bedroom where I fell asleep by 10 p.m. The next morning, I was getting ready for work when I saw Judy waiting for me. She probably thought I wouldn't cause a scene at work. She was wrong. As I tried to pass her, she grabbed my arm. Damn it, Trey, listen. I pulled my arm away. You don't have anything I want to hear. You let her come back to me while she was sleeping with that fool over and over, and you didn't tell me? All 3 of you can rot in hell. It was a while before I saw Judy again, but she stayed in touch with my mom. By then, the whole dealership knew what was going on, making for a long day. I stuck around the dealership trying to figure out my next move, then headed home. Later, my mom called and invited me over for dinner. I went, and she made Italian food. We ate, but the evening took a turn when she said, I talked to Judy today. Mom, if you bring up this family again, I'm leaving, I warned her. Trey, listen. There's something you don't know, she said, her tone serious. I know everything I need to know. Jody cheated and I'm divorcing her, I replied, trying to keep my anger in check. Good, but what about the baby? She asked, her voice softer. What? I shot up from the table, stunned. I talked to her. She's pregnant, Mom explained. You didn't tell me. My voice cracked with disbelief. She asked us not to, Mom said. So you listened to her and ignored your own son, I shot back, hurt and frustrated. We thought you might need more time to forgive her, she said, her voice tinged with guilt. Forgive her? Have you lost your mind? Do you remember what it was like living with a cheater? I couldn't hold back the anger anymore. Honey, things are different now. People are freer to try new things, she said, trying to explain. I stormed out. Was I living in an alternate universe? My mom had been through hell with my dad's cheating, and now she was telling me cheating was okay for my wife. I loved her, but her naivety was astounding. It was like she'd buy an encyclopedia from a traveling salesman in the age of smartphones. I drove past my house and ended up at a car dealership. I had my keys with me, so I went inside, found the employee lounge, and laid down on the couch. I tossed and turned until nearly 5 a.m. before falling asleep. I woke up at 10:30, and my boss found me and put up a sign asking people not to disturb me. When I finally got moving, one of the salesmen told me that the boss wanted to see me. I wasn't feeling great, my back ached from the couch, and I desperately needed a shower, but I made my way to his office. Trey, he said, looking up from his desk, you need some time off, and I can make that happen. You remember the Jacobsons? The couple you sold the blue Prevost to? Yes, I replied. Well, last week, Mr. Jacobson had a heart attack in Vancouver. He's okay now, but they need someone to bring the carriage home, and they've asked for you. Sounds perfect, I said. When can I leave? Tomorrow, he answered. Janie will book your flight. Use the company credit card for expenses. Great. I'll get packed, I said, feeling relieved. How long should I take? Take 4 days for the trip back, he instructed. But take 10. The Jacobsons aren't in a rush, and we don't need you back too soon. Hand over your deals to Ben, and he'll handle them. When I got to Vancouver, I went straight to the hospital. Mr. Jacobson had a lot of tubes and machines hooked up, and Mrs. Jacobson was fussing over him, trying to make him comfortable while he grumbled. It was clear they just wanted to be near each other, and it made me smile. Mrs. Jacobson, it's good to see you. I said. "Hi, Trey. How was the flight?" "I picked up Mr. Jacobson," I said. "Now be quiet, Robert." "You heard what the doctor said," Mrs. Jacobson teased. "I can tell him to be quiet now, and he can't argue. Doctor's orders." She winked at me. We sat, talking while Robert drifted in and out of sleep. Every time we thought he was out, a nurse would come in to check his vitals or adjust his meds. Mrs. Jacobson told me the motorhome was parked nearby and that their grandchildren had been with them. Her grandson had flown home, but their granddaughter was packing to return with me once Robert was discharged. Just as we finished talking, the granddaughter walked in, carrying 2 suitcases for her grandparents. She was about my age, attractive, and clearly uninterested in me. After a brief exchange with her grandmother, Mrs. Jacobson turned to me. "Darla has been driving our car for the last week. She'll take you to the bus to get it ready," she said, but Darla didn't seem thrilled. "Darla, stop it. You'll be fine," Mrs. Jacobson added. "She doesn't want to go back with you, Trey. She thinks she should stay with us. By the way," Mrs. Jacobson continued, "your boss said you might need a few extra days and suggested traveling through Yellowstone. We promised Darla we'd do that on the way home." "I'll see what I can do," I replied. As we were leaving, she handed me a letter authorizing me to take the bus across the border and kissed me on the cheek. "Thanks for helping. Be careful." Darla and I drove to the RV park. She kept quiet, grunting and ignoring me. I tried to make conversation, but she wasn't having it. When we reached the bus, she went inside, taking the car keys with her. I asked her for the keys, but she tossed them at me, and I barely dodged them. "What's your problem?" I muttered as I picked them up. Fed up, I hooked the car up to the bus. After a short break, I considered grabbing a cold beer, so I went inside to see if the Jacobsons had any. "No beer?" I asked. "I'm not your maid," I shot back when Darla closed the fridge and stormed off. That was it. I was done with all the women in my life, Jody, Judy, my mom, and now Darla. Mrs. Jacobson was the only one still remotely civil, but even that was wearing thin. I disconnected the power and water, got in the driver's seat, and started the engine. By 8 p.m., I'd crossed into the U.S. and cleared customs. Darla had to step outside for the border check before returning to the bedroom. I was ready to get this trip over with. By 7 a.m. the next day, we were in Burley, Idaho. I'd stopped a few times overnight for coffee and sandwiches, but I was tired and irritable. Darla sat in silence next to me for a while before finally speaking. "I'm hungry. Is there anything to eat?" I snapped, remembering how she'd treated me the night before. "I'm not your damn maid," I said, pressing the gas pedal harder. She glared at me and stormed off to the bedroom. By 9 a.m., I needed to stop at a rest area. When I came back from the bathroom, she was getting off the bus. "If you get off, you can't get back on," I said, starting the engine. By noon, I was sore from driving, so I pulled into a parking lot between 2 trucks and collapsed on the couch. I passed out almost instantly. I woke up to the hum of the Cummins diesel engine and realized we were moving. Checking the time, I saw I'd been asleep for 5 hours. Darla was at the wheel, driving fast. After watching her for a bit, I figured she knew what she was doing. Her grandfather had obviously taught her well. I made some coffee and sat in the passenger seat. We drove in silence for 2 hours, but I started to get worried about the fuel. We'd been driving for about 25 hours, averaging 60 miles per hour, and had covered around 1,500 miles. At 8 mpg, we were almost out of fuel. "Hey, we should stop for gas," I said, but she didn't respond. I tried again. "We need fuel." Still nothing. Finally, she snapped, "I took care of it while you were snoring." Surprised, I went back to the couch and fell asleep again. I never saw her eat, drink, or use the bathroom during the trip, but she managed everything while I slept. After another 3 hours, we stopped at a truck stop in Dumas, Texas. It was past 10 p.m. I made sandwiches, grabbed coffee, and took the wheel, heading for Houston. I drove through the night, only stopping once for a bathroom break and some snacks. By 8 a.m., I pulled into the dealership in Houston. I needed a break, so I went downstairs to the restroom. It had been less than 40 hours since we'd gone through customs, but it felt like days. As I came out of the restroom, I saw the Jacobsons' car pulling out. The window was down, and I got an unsavory gesture from Darla. I returned it, then made myself coffee in the break room before crashing on the couch. I didn't stir until 3 p.m. When I woke up, I found a note from my boss saying he wanted to see me. I headed to his office and knocked. "You're monopolizing the break room," he said, half joking. "I got a call from Mrs. Jacobson. She wanted to know how you survived driving with her granddaughter." I raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? He shrugged. Apparently, Darla was a pain the entire trip. The Jacobsons didn't want her with them, and the grandson left because he couldn't handle her anymore. Mrs. Jacobson was impressed you didn't strangle her, I smirked. I wanted to, believe me. He laughed. Anyway, they're glad you made it back safely. Mr. Jacobson will be discharged soon, and they want us to service the bus. They're even talking about buying it. That's great, I said. I thought they might sell it. He shook his head. Not a chance. Now go home and get some rest. The break room needs a break from you. After just 3 days, it felt like I'd been gone longer. I showered, shaved, and slept for almost 30 hours. When I finally checked my phone, I realized I hadn't even thought about it. I dug through my clothes from the trip, looking for it, but my phone wasn't there. I called my boss. Hey, can you check the break room and the coach for my phone? I think I left it somewhere. He called back a few minutes later, confirming no luck. Damn, I muttered to myself. How many customer calls did I miss? I went to the dealership and caught up with a few client messages by noon. I was heading back to my cubicle after grabbing coffee when I saw Darla walk into the break room. I quickly ducked into the staff area and waited. After about 10 minutes, the loudspeaker called my name. I took my time sipping my coffee before heading to my boss's office. He greeted me and mentioned Darla Jacobson was there to return my cell phone, which I'd left in her grandparents' car. As he was talking, his phone rang, and he stepped away to take the call. I nodded at Darla and followed her into the showroom. She held out my phone, but I kept my distance, not reaching for it right away. After a few steps, she placed it on a nearby table. Am I really that bad? She asked. Yes, I replied. She left without saying another word. Back at my desk, I was processing everything when a loud crash from outside caught my attention. I saw a wreck involving 2 cars, and when I got to the scene, it was Darla. She'd been injured, but wasn't in immediate danger. As medics worked on her, she looked up and smiled. You always catch me at my best, she said before passing out. The EMTs took her to the hospital. I called the Jacobsons to update them, assuring them Darla was okay. Then I heard Mr. Jacobson's cold response. A broken arm. Too bad it wasn't her neck. After that, Mrs. Jacobson asked me to call Darla's parents, which I did. Later, I noticed 54 messages on my phone, mostly from my mother, Judy, clients, and one from Michael Hamilton. I set up appointments with the clients and ignored the rest. I left work at 5 p.m., heading home, but detouring to the hospital. At the information desk, I found Darla's room, where her parents were already visiting. Her mom introduced me to Ralph and Joanna Jacobson. They were friendly, but Darla's dad joked about how she'd talked non-stop about our trip. Darla won't stop talking about it, her mom said. I bet, I thought, recalling how unbearable she could be. After a brief conversation, I said my goodbyes, but Darla's dad stopped me to thank me for calling them. I nodded and left, feeling out of place. Back home, I debated calling my mother, but decided against it. That decision lasted for weeks, during which both my mother and Judy tried calling, but I ignored them. Even my stepfather reached out, and while I spoke with him, I cut the conversation short when he tried to pass the phone to my mother. I received the divorce papers from my attorney, sent to the address Judy had given me. Her signature was bold and written in red marker, and there was no mention of her pregnancy. If it was real, in 2 months, I'd be free. I was starting to think about staying single, which also made me think about my current celibacy. Damn it. I hadn't been with anyone in so long that I barely sat down before heading to the bathroom to shower and get ready for dinner. Just as I finished getting dressed, the phone rang. Hello? I answered. Hi, Trey. It's Dottie Jacobson, came the voice on the other end. Hi, Mrs. Jacobson. How's Robert doing? I asked. Call me Dottie, she replied warmly. He's doing great. He's even planning our next trip to Colorado. I'm a little nervous about how he'll handle the mountains, though. Don't worry, Dottie. His trainer will make sure he's safe. As long as he doesn't try to speed, he'll be fine. That's what he says. He's been reading all about mountain driving. I chuckled. Well, I might need some Valium before we go. She laughed, and I could hear the warmth in her voice. I liked Robert and Dottie. They were a good couple. Anyway, she continued, we're having a barbecue this Friday at 6 o'clock to celebrate Robert's recovery. Bring your wife. We'd love to meet her. I froze for a moment, realizing I'd never mentioned my personal life to them. Darla probably hadn't either. They didn't know I was almost divorced. Thanks, Dottie, I said, regaining my composure. I'd love to come. And with that, I ended the call. It was a great week at work. I sold 3 vans, one of which had been a high-end bus owned by a country star. My commission was excellent. I arrived at the Jacobson estate on Friday at 6 p.m. The house was impressive, and the garage housed their boat, which I'd driven over from Vancouver. A valet parked my car, which felt strange, but I went with it. Inside, there were about 50 guests. Dottie greeted me with a hug and asked where my wife was. "I'm in the process of getting a divorce," I told her. She pulled me back and said, "Your wife is an idiot." Then she put her arm around me, leading me to the crowd. When she mentioned introducing me to some nice young ladies, I knew I didn't belong. I decided to stay only briefly. While finishing my brisket and beer, I spotted Darla running away from a guy. I didn't expect her to be here, but I should have. She grabbed my hand before I could slip away. "Come on, Trey," she said, pulling me into the house and toward the library. Yes, the library. Once inside, she looked at me, clearly upset. "This guy's an a-hole. I have a behavior problem and need help." I started to walk out. "Where are you going?" she called after me. "I'm leaving," I replied, heading toward the door. "Before you kick me out?" she asked, almost pleading. "Because I agree with him," I said, turning back slightly. "He shouldn't have said that in front of everyone. Someone had to say it." "Damn it, Trey, you're supposed to be on my side," she shot back, frustration in her voice. "Why? The only nice thing you ever said to me was while you were lying in the street, bleeding," I retorted, my words sharp. She slumped onto a chair, and I stood still, not looking at her. "How's the arm?" I asked, trying to break the tension. "It itches like hell," she muttered. "I have to use this thing to scratch." She pulled out a tool from her cast that looked like a back scratcher. "I've got to go," I said, heading for the door. "Trey?" she called after me. "Yeah?" I turned back slightly. "If I promise to behave, will you have dinner with me?" she asked softly. I paused before replying. "Darla, I'm going through a divorce. I don't need the extra stress, and I'm likely to do something that'll make things worse. So no, dinner's not a good idea." Saturday morning, I packed up and left. My mom showed up at my door later that day, and I let her in. "I've been thinking it over, and I agree with you," she said. "There are things we can compromise on, but faithfulness in marriage isn't one of them. You reminded me of the pain with your father, and no one should go through that. I'm sorry for pushing you to get back with Judy. I was selfish, only thinking about the baby and the idea of being a grandmother. Please forgive me." I forgave her, and we hugged. We chatted for another hour before she left. Monday mid-morning, my phone rang. "Trey Taylor," I answered. "Good morning, Trey. It's Michael Hamilton. I have news." "What's the news?" I asked. "Stan Morrison called to ask for his job back, and they said no," Michael replied. I laughed. "Just thought you might want to know." "Thanks, Michael," I said, hanging up. Now I was on a first-name basis with him. Around noon, the Jacobsons' carriage pulled into the yard. I was with customers, so I couldn't greet them right away. 30 minutes later, after walking my clients to their car, I made my way to the bus. Darla opened the door. "Hi, come on in," she said. I stepped inside and turned left, avoiding the driver's seat. Once seated, I noticed the smell of lasagna from the kitchen. Darla handed me a glass of wine. "Clink," she said, holding up her glass. We both took a sip. It was a great Chianti. I thought I'd offer lunch instead of dinner. Also, I figured it'd be better to talk privately instead of embarrassing or pissing you off in public, she said. I asked my grandparents if I could use the bus, and when I explained why, they agreed. They just made me promise not to drive off if I got mad. "You said when, not if," she said with a smile. "He knows you well." I expected an argument, but Darla stayed calm, took another sip of wine, and turned to fill her glass. "I hope you're hungry. I made lasagna this morning. It's really good, if I do say so myself," she said, moving around the kitchen despite her cast. The doorbell rang. "Bring it in, please," she called. I went to open the door, and my boss stood there. I waved it off awkwardly. "It's okay," I said, closing the door and returning to my seat. Darla seemed at ease. She moved naturally around the small kitchen, clearly comfortable. I smiled, but I knew one of us would probably do something to annoy the other eventually. She asked me to sit at the dining table, and I did. The bus was tight on space, but the living area expanded with sliding drawers. We ate, chatted, and finished a bottle of Chianti. Neither of us had gotten on each other's nerves yet. After a couple of hours, I decided to head back to work. "Thanks, Darla. It was a nice surprise, and the food was great." "My pleasure," she said, walking me to the door. As I stepped down, she leaned in and kissed me gently. We both paused, shocked. "Is dinner still off the table?" she asked. a mischievous twinkle in her eyes. How about tonight? Let's say 7 o'clock. She gave me her address and I started to leave, but we kissed again. It took me another 10 minutes to finally leave. I stepped off the bus and saw 6 faces, including my boss, watching me through the exhibit hall window. As soon as they realized I saw them, they scattered, except for my boss, who opened the door for me. "Well, I'm off to get ready for my date tonight," I said, laughing. 10 minutes later, Darla drove the bus out of the parking lot. As we headed to her house, my phone rang. "Trey Taylor." "So you managed not to eliminate each other, huh?" Dottie's voice came through. "Hey, Dottie, I think Robert's listening." "We want to hear your side," Robert said. "I'm a gentleman. I don't kiss and tell." I laughed. "Horse crap," Robert interrupted. "Watch your language, Robert," Dottie scolded. "Trey," she continued. "When Darla asked to borrow the coach, she was nervous, but finally confessed it was to make you lasagna. I had no idea she could cook. She blushed when she said it." "She made you lasagna?" I asked. "Yep, she just knows," Darla had replied, blushing. "Trey," Dottie said, "she's tough on the outside, but she's a good girl at heart. She's been hurt a lot and uses that attitude as armor. Just don't hurt her, okay?" "Understood," I said, though I thought Robert was overreacting. "I'm just saying, treat her right," Robert warned. "Don't worry," I replied. Before I could hang up, my phone rang again. "Trey, it's Judy," came the voice on the other end. The anger hit me instantly, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What's up, Judy?" "I just wanted you to know," she began, her voice tight. Jody kicked Stan out, but he came back today and battered her up. "She's in the hospital, Trey. Her nose is broken. She's in ICU and Stan's in jail." My heart sank. "What about the baby?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. "She lied about it," Judy replied, her tone flat. "It's gone, and honestly, I'm done with her, Trey." "She's still my wife until the divorce is final," I said. "She stopped being your wife the day she signed those papers," Judy retorted. "Goodbye." When we reached Darla's gated community, the guard acted surprised when I told him I was visiting her. He laughed as he called her to check, then wished me luck as he opened the gate. At dinner, I learned Darla liked steak and potatoes, medium rare ribeye with blue cheese and baked potatoes. I was impressed by how she handled cutting the steak with her arm in a cast. She ate half, then switched to her drink, and the waiter offered to pack the leftovers. I joked, "I didn't know you had doggy bags here." The waiter grinned. "First time for everything." As we left, the same guard was at the gate, but this time his expression was less amused. I glanced at Darla and joked, "I don't have many dates, and he's not used to me coming home in the same car I left in. Usually I take a cab." When we got to her house, she invited me inside. "What would you like to drink?" she asked. "A gin and tonic," I replied. We sat in silence for a while, and then she made a move. I got the hint. We spent the night together. The next morning, I called my boss. "I won't be in today," I said. "Why not?" he asked. "I'm still on my date from last night," I replied. He laughed. The days following were unexpectedly quiet, as though the storm that had consumed my life had finally passed. The finality of my decision settled over me like a heavy but reassuring weight. I was done chasing answers and seeking closure from those who had broken my trust. I had moved on, not perfectly, not painlessly, but decisively. Darla and I continued to see each other. Her sharp edges softened with time, revealing a humor and depth that complemented her fiery nature. I discovered in her a shared resilience, a refusal to be defined by past mistakes. Our differences often led to spirited debates, but they became a source of growth rather than conflict. She challenged me in ways I didn't know I needed, and I found myself slowly, cautiously, allowing hope to bloom again. Jody's presence in my life faded like the final echoes of a distant storm. I received updates through Judy, but they felt more like distant news than personal revelations. I no longer felt anger, only a strange, muted gratitude for the lessons learned and the paths that led me here. My work at the dealership thrived. The Jacobsons became regulars, their enthusiasm for life a constant reminder of what a true partnership looked like. They often invited me and Darla for dinners, their support unwavering as they encouraged our relationship. It was at one such dinner that Dottie leaned over and whispered, "You've been through enough, Trey. Let yourself be happy." I still thought of my mother, of her misguided attempts to smooth over my life's jagged edges. Our relationship had improved, though her mention of Jody or the past still caused tension. But I'd learned to set boundaries, to choose the people and stories I allowed into my life. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I found myself on the Jacobsons coach, parked outside Darla's home. She'd invited me over for lasagna, and as I stepped inside, I was greeted by the familiar scent of garlic and herbs. She smiled at me, her cast finally removed, and raised a glass of Chianti. "To new beginnings," she said softly. I clinked my glass against hers, the weight of the past lifting slightly with each sip. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid to find out. Years ago, I had no clue that my life would take such a drastic turn. Back then, I was an ambitious lawyer, focused on winning every case. My clients were often unsavory characters, some even dangerous, whose names were whispered in circles I wasn't always proud to be associated with. But I thrived in the chaos, quickly realizing that law wasn't just about justice. It was a game of strategy. My ability to navigate this shady terrain earned me both wealth and notoriety. The deeper I went, the more entangled I became, forming alliances with those who could shift things in my favor. As time passed, my moral compass shifted, leading me to make decisions that left me indebted to men like Sergeant Devin Cross. Despite his upstanding nature, our paths crossed during the worst time in his life. That encounter would later come back to haunt him, linking us in an unspoken contract. He owed me after I saved his family's home from foreclosure, and it wasn't long before I called in that favor. What neither of us could anticipate was how this debt would bring unwanted attention to both of us. Falcon's Nest, a bar and grill along the aging Route 7, sits at the intersection of 3 counties, just outside town. Known as a hangout for local law enforcement, it might not seem like an ideal spot for a discreet meeting, which is why it was perfect for me. I pulled into the parking lot, already crowded, and headed inside. For a cop bar, Falcon's Nest was surprisingly upscale. With a spacious bar and plenty of seating. It was the last Friday of the month, busy but not overwhelming, ideal for a conversation with Sergeant Cross. The crowd made the meeting appear casual, not suspicious. When I walked in, most of the patrons greeted me with hostile stares. I expected it, given that I was suspected of liquidating my unfaithful wife and her lover, a police detective. Of course, there was no charge, no bodies, no evidence. The couple and their car had vanished without a trace. Still, in their eyes, I was guilty. I had motive, and as a lowly lawyer, I needed proof. When Devin arrived, he didn't look thrilled with my choice of venue. He was tall, well-built, and could only be described as honorable. He was there to repay a debt and cleanse himself of the guilt of owing a man like me. Now let me be frank. I'm what you'd call crooked, a lawyer without any moral standing. I've been an unindicted co-conspirator in at least half a dozen organized crime cases. Poor Devin was in a bad place the day he walked into my office with a thick stack of foreclosure papers. At the time, he was a Metropolitan Police officer, a sufferer of carnivory mortgage fraud. It was early 2008, and he, his wife, and their 4 children were about to lose their home. He had already approached every honest and semi-honest lawyer, but had found no real help. He came to me out of sheer desperation. Frankly, I'm not sure why I helped him. He was a good, honest cop, loyal to his friends, but he wasn't someone I could use. And he couldn't pay. He admitted that right away. Online scammers had taken his last dime. The foreclosure was scheduled for the next day. He just sat in my office, this large, physically strong man with tears in his eyes, telling me about his daughter, his little princess, who had cancer. He didn't know how to tell her and her brothers that they were about to lose their home. I filed for bankruptcy to stop the sale. Then, I had some of my shadier clients visit a mortgage broker and get a confession that the foreclosure documents were forged. In other words, a mortgage fraudster, backed by 2 of the more violent criminals, had, for once, told the truth. It only took a bigger bribe to the court than Deutsche Bank was willing to pay to finally get some justice. Why did I do all this? I still don't know. But it was tough for Devin Cross to accept that his family home had been saved by a crook like me. "You chose a strange place to meet," he said. "Even someone like me has a conscience. I didn't want you to feel obligated by helping me." "So you picked this place?" he asked as Lottie, the barmaid, approached. "What can I get you, Bruce?" she asked. She and I had a long history of harmless flirting and me giving her way too much advice. She had a young son and no man at home, having made the mistake of choosing looks over reliability. There was tension in Lottie's expression. Everyone believed I was guilty, so I must be, which meant that anyone seen with me would suffer. And yet, I noticed Lottie came to the table when she could have easily passed my service to someone else. Lottie was a good friend. As it turned out, I had more people like her than I realized. I didn't want them to suffer for staying loyal to me. I needed to fix my life and show people they could feel comfortable around me again. Devin Cross stood in my way, offering me a lifeline, but I had to make the most of it. "Get us 2 Boston beers, Lottie," I said. "I have to say, counselor, you've got guts, coming in here where Paul Moreno's friends and colleagues hang out," Devin said. Paul Moreno was the guy who seduced my wife and dragged me into all this trouble. He, his Ford GT, and my wife vanished on the night of March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, after back-to-back thunderstorms flooded 3 counties around Schoharie Creek. In any of the western states, it would have been called a river, but here it's misleadingly called a creek, a name that's caused plenty of suffering. People have tried for years to build bridges and structures around it, only to pay with lives and property for underestimating the Schoharie. By the morning of March 18th, all the emergency crews were focused on rescuing flood sufferers. No one realized my wife and her lover were missing for a few days. Then, of course, all suspicion fell on me. "Fortune favors the bold, as they say," I told Devin. We made small talk for a while as he got down to business. After 2 beers, I finally said, "Just tell me what you came to say, and I'll handle the rest. Don't worry, no one will ever know the advice came from you." He leaned in and whispered, "They've got a warrant, and they're coming to your house and office at 6 a.m. on Sunday." I pushed my chair back, stood up, and let it crash to the floor. Then I shouted, "Look, when I need advice, I'm not going to get it from some subway pig, and that guy will be a better friend than you. And for the last time, I don't know what happened to my wife." I stormed out, leaving a bewildered Devin behind. But he was sharp and would realize that everyone would assume the worst. They'd think he was an ambitious cop trying to get ahead. Pushing for a confession from me wouldn't hurt his career, but being seen in a secret meeting with me would destroy him. As it stood, the encounter was public enough that no one would believe he had tipped me off. Walking out of Falcon's Rest, I sighed. I had only myself to blame for how things had spiraled out of control. I'd let my emotions cloud my judgment. Now I'd have to work hard to get out from under the oppressive weight of justice in this country. Yet my late wife's words about milk haunted me, like a swarm of bees, stinging my heart until all the life drained from it.
October 1st. I saw him again today. He's very tall and handsome, with wavy black hair. Jenny says she knows him. In fact, she slept with him. He's a cop, which means he's probably following me because of Bruce. It's hard to imagine someone as ordinary as Bruce making people so suspicious, but it's likely due to his being a lawyer for high-profile criminals. The people he deals with are much more intriguing than poor Bruce. Don't get me wrong, I love him dearly. He's like a teddy bear, the kind of person you feel safe with. I'll never understand why people think he's dangerous. Jenny says, "The cop chasing me is a real stud. He's loaded. His name's Paul Moreno. She's been seeing him for the last 6 months. Her husband Bob is like a carbon copy of my Bruce, except he's got a dull real estate practice instead of handling criminal defense." You can't blame Jenny for falling for a cop's charm. Temptation like that is hard to resist. After 7 years of marriage and 2 kids, she's craving excitement. Or so she says. As for me, after 15 years of marriage and a 14-year-old daughter, I'm ready for a rocking chair on the back porch. Women like me just don't catch the attention of young studs anymore. It makes me feel ancient. October 15th. Bruce is out of town again. Lately, it feels like he's traveling more and more. If it were anyone else, I'd suspect infidelity. But Bruce is loyal, like a spaniel. He joined a gym today thanks to Jenny. She's into fitness and wanted a workout partner. I'm not in bad shape, not like Bruce, who's dealing with middle age, but I figured I could use some toning. I've upped my morning jog from 1 mile to 2. Still, I need to work on my stomach and bum. I've been feeling anxious about the idea of my daughter leaving home. Maybe getting in shape will help. Why did I let my 14-year-old talk me into sending her to boarding school? Rachel's so much like my mother, full of ambition, with little concern for others. Mom still mocks my choice of career, but I believe helping others is the highest calling. Being a social worker can be frustrating, but on those rare days when you help someone change their life, it's incredibly rewarding. Rachel might be trying to escape the stigma of Bruce's profession. People say such cruel things, and a teenage girl can be very sensitive. Maybe it's better for her to leave, but I'll still miss her. I saw him again today. God, he's so handsome. He was at my gym looking like a total stud in a tight suit. You could see the definition of his abs, but I tried not to stare at the bulge in his shorts. Why he's still following me, I don't know, but Paul Moreno is definitely catching my attention. October 17th. I saw Paul Moreno at the gym again today. He caught my eye and held my gaze until I had to look away. Jenny thinks he's interested in me, but I can't imagine why. Unless it's because of Bruce. I've been thinking about Paul a lot lately. It's just a harmless fantasy, right? Nothing wrong with that. November 2nd, I voted today, though it probably doesn't matter. As I was leaving the polling station, I saw Paul again. He wasn't even trying to hide. He hadn't been following me for a while, but over the past few days, he's reappeared. He actually said hello this time, so I stopped to talk. "Are you following me again?" I asked, turning to face him. "Well, that's my job. And my excuse," he replied with a smirk. "But what if I was just following you for other reasons?" "Why would you do that?" I questioned, narrowing my eyes. He grinned. "Have you looked in a mirror lately?" I sighed and waved him off. "Stop! I'm the mother of a teenager." "Ever heard the term MILF?" he asked, his tone playful. "No, what's that?" I responded, confused. He leaned in slightly. "It's a term for a hot mom who catches the eye of younger guys." "Stop it! I'm an old lady," I said, shaking my head. He chuckled softly. "Yes, you are an older woman, but not old, just mature." At that moment, I saw someone I knew and ended the conversation. I couldn't believe he was flirting with me like that. Sure, I've lost 5 pounds since joining the gym, but still, a young guy interested in me? It's flattering. I used to feel intimidated by all the younger women with their fit bodies, but getting a personal trainer and sticking to it is clearly paying off. Bruce has noticed too. He just sent me 24 roses. When I called to ask why, he said he wanted to send flowers to his beautiful wife. What can I say about a man like that? I love him deeply. I might flirt with a handsome young man, but I'll never betray my devoted husband.
"Jake," I said as soon as he picked up the phone. "Jesus, do you know what time it is, counselor?" he groaned, sounding half asleep. "I've been calling you since about 9, I replied, frustration creeping into my voice. "I've been at work," Jake Trumbull explained. "Well, I've got a new job for you," I said, getting straight to the point. "Can it wait?" Jake asked, clearly not thrilled. "No, it's urgent," I pressed. "And what is it?" he asked, now sounding more awake. "I need a complete black binder at my residence and office by Sunday. Dawn." "This Sunday?" Jake questioned, surprised. "Yes, this Sunday," I confirmed. "It takes 72 hours and you're giving me 24 at best," Jake pointed out. "I'm sorry, I just got a message that I need it," I explained. "Well, it's going to cost you a lot," Jake warned. "How much?" I asked, bracing myself. 35, Jake said. "After all the business I've sent your way, that's my special price. For anyone else, it would be 50. Jake made no mention of the fact that it was unlikely I'd live to send him any more cases. Moreover, at this point, whether I was a business partner or not, I was in no position to bargain. He could charge me any price he wanted and I would have to pay it. "Fine, but do it," I said.
November 9th. I've seen Paul 3 times this week. Now he always smiles and waves. Jenny is fully involved with him and says he's the best lover she's ever had. He's 29, 8 years younger than me. Jenny claims that being with him makes her feel like it's her first time. Today, while I was at Starbucks sipping my mocha latte, Paul came over and sat at my table. He didn't say anything for a long time, just looked at me and I kept ignoring him. Finally, he broke the silence. "I've been reassigned," he said, breaking the silence. "What?" I asked, confusion creeping into my voice. "I'm no longer officially following you," he explained. "And what does that mean?" I asked, still trying to understand. "Well, for starters, it means my superiors don't believe you're involved in any crimes your husband may have committed," he said calmly. Then, unexpectedly, he reached across the table and placed his hand over mine. "But it also means I can finally tell you how much I like you. I'd like us to get to know each other better." I pulled my hand back slightly. "You know I'm married. What do you mean by get to know me better?" He gently took my other hand between his. "It means you're a beautiful woman married to a man who can't fulfill you. You deserve to experience real love between a man and a woman. What about Jenny? I've heard you two were involved, I asked, trying to steer the conversation away. What Jenny and I had was just casual. She's unhappy in her marriage, but I'm looking for something deeper, he said, dismissing the topic. Besides, you don't really think any man would choose her over you, he added with a smile. I met his gaze, my voice firm. As I said, I'm married. I've never cheated on my husband. He leaned in slightly. Can he say the same? You've seen him. What do you think? I think we both know you deserve more, he said softly. At that, I stood up, leaving most of my latte untouched. I had to get out of there. This man was affecting me more than I cared to admit, and it made me uncomfortable. December 1st. Since our encounter at the coffee shop, I hadn't seen Paul, and I felt both relieved and disappointed. I regretted not seeing him. His attention did wonders for my ego, and I couldn't deny my physical attraction to him. After all, I had never been with anyone but my husband. I was curious about what it would be like with another man, especially someone so wealthy and skilled. After work, I was walking to my car in the DSS parking lot. It was a little late because I had been delayed by paperwork. The lot was well lit but empty. As I approached my car, I had the distinct feeling that someone was watching me. I bent down to open the door, and suddenly Paul was right next to me. I jumped, startled. Paul, you nearly scared me to end. Are you stalking me now? I'm sorry, he said, slipping his hand around my waist under my open coat. I just needed to see you. I can't stop thinking about you. I probably should have been scared, but in truth, he had been on my mind constantly. I wanted to see him too. Please, I begged. Leave me alone. I can't do this to my husband. Instead of responding, he leaned in and kissed me. There was an electric force between us. I need you, he said, more than I've ever needed any woman. If it were just about me, I'd leave you alone, but I can feel your body calling to me. I couldn't stop myself from kissing him back, but then I pulled away, jumped into my car, and shut the door. I wish I could, but I can't.
They didn't bother knocking. 4 officers in tactical gear picked the lock and barged into my house early Sunday morning. I suppose they thought they'd catch me off guard, asleep. Instead, I was already up, in the kitchen, making what the tourist brochures call a full English breakfast. Sure, I swapped out the kippers for lox, but I found a specialty shop that sold kidney pie. I was frying scrambled eggs in a large pan when the first officer stormed into the kitchen. I hope you like scrambled eggs, I said as he grabbed me and shoved me outside. They threw me into a police van while they ransacked my house. They tore up carpet and dug through my flower beds. Thankfully, most of my floors were wood, so they only damaged a few boards and left the upper floors relatively untouched. The basement, though, they completely wrecked. What bothered me most was when they went after the trunk of my car. It felt unnecessary since I'd left the keys in the ignition, but it seemed destruction was their main goal. Still, they weren't entirely heartless. After they finished tearing apart my house, a few officers I'd gotten to know over the years invited me to Denny's for lunch. So, where'd you hide the bodies, Bruce? They asked, while I ate what they called the big breakfast, which was a letdown compared to the meal I'd planned. As far as I know, there aren't any bodies. Come on. They disappeared in March. It's October now. Do you think it'll rain today? It's been pretty dry since those spring and summer storms. My flower beds are ruined, so I'll have to replant bulbs if I want flowers next spring. But at least I'm better off than the folks near Schoharie Creek, I said, referring to the flooding in the area. The officers at Denny's weren't interested in the flood or my flowers. They only cared about one thing, getting a confession. They were desperate because they had next to no evidence. The problem was, I knew how quickly things could change, just like a creek spilling over. You might not see those spring flowers, but you'll feel better if you help us out. We know you had your reasons. Maybe you just lost control. Stop being a lawyer for once and own up to it. We'll work with you. I don't think it'll rain. Looks like we're in for a drought after all that wet weather. I'll stop by Lowe's later for some light bulbs. Okay, have it your way, lawyer, but cop butchers get the end penalty in this state. You might want to think long and hard about that.
December 9th. I had one hell of a day. We got an early call, 5 kids in need of protection. Normally I don't work with Child Protective Services, but it's the busy season. With a bad flu outbreak and people taking time off for the holidays, we were short-staffed and had to be flexible. Still, placing 5 children under 7 in emergency care was no easy task. By 4 a.m., we had placed the children and set up support for the new foster parents. I was feeling pretty good about it until the state foster care department called, unhappy with the placement. It was the same bureaucratic nonsense as always. They were concerned about child care payments going to state retirees. This could be considered double dipping, one of the state workers said. We spent an hour going back and forth on the issue. It escalated all the way to the county executive and the state DSS commissioner. Just when I thought the case was falling apart, I heard from the foster parents. "When are the kids coming?" the woman asked. "We're ready. My 2 daughters are here to help." "Well, the state's concerned about making payments since you receive a state pension," I explained. Her response was filled with real anger. "Well, tell that idiot governor to keep his lousy payments. Just send the kids." The county executive laughed when he heard this and said, "Send the kids. We can sue the state for the money later if needed." It took another 3 hours to get the children to their new home and settled in. By the time I headed home, it was nearly 8 o'clock, and I didn't get in until 9 o'clock. The first thing I did was take a hot shower. I thought about calling Bruce. Sometimes when I call, we can talk for hours, but other times he seems busy, like his clients take up all his time. Usually I wait for him to call me, but today, I just needed to talk to someone about my day. I wrapped myself in my terry cloth robe and was about to call when the doorbell rang. Tightening the robe, I answered with the chain on. Paul stood at the door, looking both handsome and a little guilty. "Can I come in?" he asked. "I don't think that's a good idea," I replied. "I know your husband's out of town. You're all alone. I just want to come in for a little while, maybe have a cup of coffee and talk." "I can't, Paul," I said. "You can trust me." He smiled gently. "It's not you I don't trust, it's me. Please, just for a few minutes." For some reason, I let him in. I made us some coffee and we sat on opposite ends of the large sectional couch. As I sat down, I adjusted my robe, which felt too short for the situation. "Relax," he said, noticing my discomfort. "I'm not here to take advantage of you. I'm just a friend. I heard you had a rough day." "Yeah," I replied. And as we talked about my day, I started to feel more at ease. I convinced myself that there was nothing wrong with 2 people having a drink. We switched from coffee to wine and ate frozen pizza for dinner. It was nearly midnight when Paul finally said what he had come to say. "Elaine, I'll always be your friend, but I have feelings for you, deep feelings. What I'm feeling for you is love." His words made me tense. "Please," he continued, "let me finish. Your husband is in New York right now, meeting with organized crime members and their anti-surveillance expert. They're plotting how to beat the government's wiretapping. These are dangerous people and he's helping them." "Stop! I don't want to hear this. Bruce isn't here to defend himself and it's not fair." "You're loyal, I see that. But is it fair to you to be tied to a man like that? When I followed you and fell in love, I saw what a kind, caring woman you are. You help people. You're a saint who married the devil. But no matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." Over the course of the evening, we had gradually moved closer on the couch. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. We both knew where things were headed, like a runaway train that couldn't be stopped. Then I heard the phone ringing. It had probably been ringing for a while, and suddenly it was clear who was calling. "Bruce," I said, breaking away from Paul's grip. It was Bruce. "Just checking in," he said. "Sorry, did I wake you? I lost track of time." I braced myself and tried to have a normal conversation. Bruce was chatty, going on and on, while I watched Paul grow more impatient. Finally, he gave me a sad smile and quietly left. Bruce's call had saved me from crossing a line I could never uncross. But did I really want to be saved?
The DA's conference room had a worn-out look, as if it hadn't been updated in the last 20 years. Tanya Marshall, the daughter of a former state senator who had dodged prosecution and secured her a job in the DA's office, now served as the DA herself. She wasn't better or worse than the others, just another person in power who oppressed the poor while complaining about the rich affording lawyers. "Where's your tool, Mr. Gray?" she asked. "We didn't find it when we searched your house." "A tool?" I said. "A Smith & Wesson .44 Magnum, registered to you. It's missing." "It is? This is the first I've heard of it. It was in the top drawer of my nightstand. Is it really gone?" "This would be easier if we were honest with each other," she said. "Sure, go ahead and start. What evidence did your officers supposedly find in my house?" "All in good time," she replied. "Well then, I'll answer your questions on my own time," I said, standing up. With that, she handed me a notice of my right to appear before the grand jury. That was the real point of the meeting. I had no intention of going. The outcome was clear. I was going to be indicted for 2 liquidations. The DA had no choice. They'd broken into my wife's desk and taken her diary. They knew all about her affair. Of course, to someone like Tanya, it read like a tragic love story. My perspective was different. It was a shame about the desk. It was a small colonial-era antique that had sat in a dealer's display case for nearly a year. We had just gotten married, and our daughter Rachel was learning to walk. Elaine was working on her master's degree in social work, and I was a struggling new lawyer. I loved her and knew how much she wanted that desk. Every time we walked by the store, she'd stop and gaze at it. I saved every penny I could, but when I finally went to buy it for our anniversary, it was gone from the window. I went inside and asked for it, and the manager said it had been moved to the back. When it was delivered to our little apartment, Elaine was overjoyed. Over the years, I watched her sit at that desk, thinking how lucky I was to have her. Love is made up of those little moments, her excitement over that antique desk, our daughter's first steps, buying our first house, Elaine's pride when she earned her master's degree. All those moments combined, they form what people call love. When they opened the desk and found the journal, I suppose I could have left the drawers unlocked. But then they might not have noticed the diary. Locking them made it stand out, and I needed them to find it. Still, the destruction of the desk stung. Maybe it made me realize that Elaine was really gone. The diary had the effect I expected. Its contents leaked quickly, and the pressure on the DA's office ramped up. They had what they saw as proof, and the public knew about the affair. My unfaithful wife and her lover had become a modern-day Romeo and Juliet.
January 2nd. I can't do this, can I? Jenny just laughs at my hesitation. What's wrong with you two? Your husbands are out of town. You go to his apartment and no one will ever know. It's that simple. How am I ever going to face Bruce again? I asked, feeling the heavy weight of guilt. I don't care what people say about him. He's always treated me well. What am I supposed to say if he finds out? Blame him for leaving you alone all the time, Jenny suggested, casually brushing aside my worries. He doesn't really leave that often, I muttered, trying to defend Bruce despite my internal struggle. And when we're together, we have a good marriage. It's just that Paul makes me feel things I've never felt before. Like I said, Bruce won't find out, and if he does, just do what I did with Bob, Jenny said, her voice indifferent. What did you do? Remember the day we arrived here and Bob looked so upset? Yeah, I remember. At one point, he asked to lie down in the bedroom. He looked almost sick. Well, he found out I had slept with Paul, and I told him everything. I told him I still loved him, but that there was nothing he could do about it. I said a man like Paul knows how to treat women. Bob probably wanted to eliminate him, but physically, he couldn't take on Paul. You're lucky Bob doesn't own a tool, I said, knowing Bruce wasn't the type to react that way. Honestly, I added, thinking it over, I don't think Bruce would handle it like Bob did. I have a feeling he'd do something about it. But Jenny insisted I was wrong. We talked about how much Bruce loves me, and she said he'd handle it just like Bob. But deep down, I knew Bruce was different. I'd seen Paul about 6 times in the last 3 weeks. We were never truly alone, but I noticed him watching me. Maybe he was watching Bruce too. Today, Bruce was home and being very attentive. Paul slipped me a note. It had an address, a date, and a time. I'm pretty sure it's the address of his apartment, and the time is when Bruce will be in New York. I don't want to go, but I know I will. I keep telling myself I'm only going to ask Paul to leave me alone. January 15th. God, what have I done? I spent the day at Paul's apartment. It started off fine. I told him we couldn't be alone together, that I couldn't betray my husband. But things spiraled out of control, and we ended up in bed. I left in tears, swearing it wouldn't happen again, but neither of us believed it was really over. As I walked out of his apartment, I knew I would definitely be back.
Tanya's presentation before the grand jury was far better than her usual, which meant it was good, likely the product of a ghostwriter. Her boss, District Attorney Silva Marks, sat beside her. Marks wasn't about to let a subordinate steal all the glory, but wasn't foolish enough to handle the case herself. I represented myself. Presiding Judge Bascom warned me that a lawyer representing himself has a fool for a client. I replied that it's better than having a fool for a lawyer. Bascom would do whatever he could to ensure justice was served, meaning I'd be convicted. He'd bend over backward to support a weak prosecution and twist the concept of reasonable doubt into something closer to guilty until proven innocent in his instructions to the jury. My only concern was that someone might notice I had an ace up my sleeve, waiting for the right moment to play it. I had the truth on my side, while they had the tragic romance of Romeo and Juliet. The lovers were a police officer and my wife, a social worker. I was cast as the villain. Whether I was innocent or guilty didn't matter. Life isn't fair, and justice rarely finds its way into the courtroom. Sergeant McVeigh, did you open the trunk of the defendant's car? Tanya asked her first witness. Yes, the car immediately raised my suspicions. It was an old brown Toyota Camry, not what you'd expect from a high-priced lawyer. It's very unremarkable with a large trunk, McVeigh said, setting the scene for the jury. I see, Tanya said, flashing a smile at the jury, subtly suggesting I was being sly. What, if anything, did you find in the trunk? It looked recently cleaned, but we found hair and fibers matching Officer Paul Moreno and Elaine Gray, McVeigh answered. So, it's possible their bodies were in the trunk? Tanya asked, giving a knowing look to the jury. Objection. That calls for speculation, I interrupted. Judge Bascom, predictably siding with the prosecution, overruled. The witness is an expert. He's being asked for his opinion. Tanya nodded and turned back to the witness. So, Sergeant? She prompted. McVeigh, emboldened by the ruling, confidently continued. In my expert opinion, the Camry was used to transport and dispose of your wife and her lover's bodies. When it was my turn for cross-examination, I asked, Sergeant, if the bodies were transported in the Camry, what happened to the bright blue Ford Mustang Shelby 500 GT? McVeigh looked confused. I'm not sure what you mean. Paul Moreno's car, his prized Mustang. It's still missing, isn't it? I clarified. I don't know about that, McVeigh mumbled, clearly caught off guard. But you do know his car is gone, and that car is anything but unremarkable, isn't it? I directed the question more to the jury than to McVeigh. After a pause, McVeigh reluctantly admitted, Yes, Paul's car is missing. Now back to the Camry, I continued. You broke into the trunk, but why didn't you use the keys that were already in the ignition? McVeigh looked momentarily stunned, but before he could respond, Tanya objected. The question is argumentative and assumes facts not in evidence. The judge, unsurprisingly, sustained the objection. There was no point in pressing further. McVeigh could only look sheepish as he retreated. Next, the prosecution called investigator Kim Eng to the stand. Eng eagerly informed the jury about pulling up the carpet in my basement and discovering traces of blood. Were you able to identify this blood by type or DNA? Tanya asked, her tone heavy, as if building up to something damning. No, it was too decomposed, Eng replied. But there was a strong smell of bleach in the basement, which is why I suspected we'd find blood. Bleach is often used to clean up blood stains. When it was my turn to question Eng, I kept it brief. The basement was the laundry room, wasn't it? I asked. Yes, Eng confirmed. You expected to find bleach in a laundry room, didn't you? I pressed. I can't say. It depends on the person doing the laundry, Eng answered evasively. The 7 women on the jury didn't seem to agree with Eng's attempt to dodge the question. But then came the real drama, the reading of my wife's diary.
January 16th. I feel both guilty and like I'm floating on air. I can't stop thinking about Paul, his incredible body and how he made me feel. But the guilt over Bruce is eating at me. For the first time, I want to believe all the terrible things people say about him, but I know they're not true. Bruce has always been so loving, and I've repaid him with the ultimate betrayal. I feel like my guilt is written all over me, as if Bruce will look at me and instantly know what I've done to him, to us. The desk I'm writing at was a gift from Bruce, bought at a time when we didn't have much money. It's a real antique. I used to stop and admire it in the store window, even though I knew we couldn't afford it. Despite our struggles, I stopped using birth control, a decision I made on my own. Bruce never criticized me for it. He was thrilled when I got pregnant. Even when we were struggling financially, he somehow found a way to buy me this extravagant gift. My loving husband of 15 years whom I've betrayed so easily. I keep going back and forth. Should I never see Paul again? Or should I run straight into his arms? When Bruce gets back from his trip tonight, Maybe he'll sense what's happened, and that will end it one way or another. I don't know what I'll say to him. I don't want to hurt him. January 17th. Nothing happened last night. If Bruce suspects anything, he didn't show it. Still, our interaction felt off, like there was a distance between us. Maybe I'm imagining it because of my guilt. Bruce seemed tired, so I'll just have to wait and see. I left for work early this morning, barely able to look him in the eye. I had barely made it to work when Paul called. We chatted until I had to get back to my job, and somehow, talking to him lifted my spirits. It gave me hope that everything would work out. I have to admit, what I feel for Paul is love. Maybe not the same love I have for Bruce, but it's something I've never experienced before. January 19th. I took a long lunch today, not really for lunch, but to meet Paul at his apartment. He works the 4 to midnight shift, so we had a couple of hours together. When I got home, Bruce seemed calm, but I can't shake the feeling that something's different between us. There's a distance I can't quite figure out. February 12th. This past month has been chaos. My affair with Paul has intensified. We see each other at least twice a week during the day, and when Bruce is out of town, which has been happening more often, we meet in the evenings. Paul told me that Bruce is involved with some very dangerous people. The FBI is concerned because Bruce is helping them with anti-surveillance technology, blocking their warrants. The equipment is illegal, but can be purchased with special permits. Paul didn't say it outright, but I know he's still monitoring Bruce. I should be thankful Paul always knows where Bruce is, but the tension between Paul and me is growing. I'm torn between two men I love and their enemies. I'm trapped in a no-win situation. Bruce has been such a good husband, showering me with gifts, sending flowers, and being so loving. But I can't shake the feeling he knows what's going on. He hasn't shown any signs, but after 15 years, I can tell something is bothering him. March 16th. Rachel is home for spring break. I haven't seen her since Christmas, and she seems happy. But I suspect she wanted to go to boarding school to escape the rumors about Bruce. She loves him, but she can't avoid the whispers. It must be hard for her to deal with what people say about her father. With Rachel home, Paul and I can't meet at the house, and Paul mentioned that people at work are getting suspicious about us. It would ruin his career if anyone found out. Paul plans to ask for a transfer. He wants me to leave Bruce, but when it comes down to it, I know what Paul is asking of me is wrong. What I've been doing with him is wrong on so many levels. Seeing Rachel reminds me that I'm first and foremost her mother and Bruce's wife. They don't deserve the pain I would cause by leaving with Paul. The hurt I would inflict on my family far outweighs the pain I'll feel losing Paul. I think I'm finally coming to my senses. This passion for Paul has clouded my judgment. I need to do the right thing. When I see Paul tomorrow, I'll end it. It will hurt him, but he'll survive. Jenny is waiting for him, I know that. She's young and beautiful, and her husband can't stop her infatuation with Paul. A man like Bob doesn't stand a chance against someone like Paul. People say Bruce isn't like other men. Would Bruce hurt Paul if he found out? I don't think Bruce would ever hurt me, but maybe I'm wrong. The rumors, the horrible things people say about him, they can't all be true, can they? I've known and loved Bruce all these years, yet I still have doubts. Paul keeps insisting Bruce is dangerous and that I'm at risk, but I just can't believe Bruce could hurt anyone. March 17th. Tomorrow I'm going to break up with Paul. It will hurt, but it's the right thing to do. I called Jenny and told her she might need to comfort Paul after tomorrow.
The young paralegal Tanya had selected finished reading the final entry in my wife's diary. The prosecution had aimed to paint me as a jealous, abusive husband who came between two lovers. But Elaine's diary didn't quite support that story. After all, she had chosen to stay in our home instead of running off with the man who tried to steal her. Paul Moreno was a homewrecker, a man who knew my wife was happily married but pursued her anyway. Maybe he believed the rumors law enforcement spread about me, or maybe he thought he was rescuing the woman he loved. But in the end, the two lovers waited too long and met a tragic end. In a case like this, there are so many what-ifs. What if Elaine had confessed to me earlier, or what if they had ended the affair sooner? Who knows how things might have played out, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was saving my life. After hearing Elaine's diary, the jury was already leaning toward conviction, and everyone in the courtroom could sense it. I had a long list of witnesses, but only one truly mattered. Jake Trumbull took the stand. On paper, he seemed like an ordinary witness. His expert report was 500 pages of technical details, with mention of a video buried on page 439. We started with his credentials: a degree in electrical engineering from RIT, Service and Army Intelligence, and 20 years in the FBI. Not bad. What I hadn't fully considered was that, after leaving the FBI, Jake had been hired by the same criminal organizations he once pursued for the government. He had become invaluable to me and others in battling government surveillance. "Mr. Trumbull, have you done any work for me in the past?" I asked. "Yes, several times," he replied. "And the last time you worked for me, what exactly did you do?" I inquired. "I installed a full video surveillance system covering both your home and office inside and out. We call it Black Cover, designed to catch dirty deeds," Trumbull explained. "And what do you mean by dirty deeds?" I pressed. "The usual unauthorized entry to plant listening devices or evidence," he clarified. "And did you discover any such deeds?" I asked, leaning in slightly. "Yes. My team and I observed Sergeant McVeigh take the keys to a brown Camry, open the trunk, and dump materials from a bag inside. Later, he returned with other officers and broke open the trunk with a crowbar. They then collected what they called trace samples from the trunk." The courtroom buzzed with shock. Trumbull was in his element and submitted the video as evidence. Despite the prosecution's objections, Trumbull went on to explain how investigator Eng had planted blood in the basement. Without forensic evidence, the prosecution's case crumbled. They had no proof of a crime, just a missing couple, a missing tool, and an ordinary car. When the not guilty verdict was read, my daughter Rachel hugged me. She never believed I had eliminated her mother, and that's all that really mattered to me. Still, many people believed I'd gotten away with liquidation. Surprisingly, no action was taken against the officers who tried to frame me. In a way, they saved my life by presenting the prosecution with a case too weak to convict. The long, dry summer revealed a blue Ford Mustang in the now exposed mud of Schoharie Creek. Inside the car, they found the bodies, crammed into the frame. It turned out the floodwaters had carried the car away and then let it sink deep into the rushing creek. Elaine's purse with the GPS tracker I had planted was found along with her remains. Elaine had been right to be suspicious. I was collecting evidence of her affair. I loved her, but she had hurt me deeply. In my mind, Paul Moreno was the snake who had tried to destroy a good marriage. It broke my heart, but I was planning a divorce, not a liquidation. Still, the police wouldn't have believed that. My wife and her lover were dead, and even if I were a saint, they would have found me guilty. But I was no saint. Elaine's body lay beneath Paul's in the car. The autopsy revealed that they had both been shot, but the bullets were meant for Paul. They passed through him and into her. The double homicide was the result of a powerful weapon, a .44 caliber Smith & Wesson hand tool, the same one that had disappeared from my nightstand. If the police had just been patient, they wouldn't have needed to plant evidence. The lover's story and the leaked diary had pushed them to act too soon. I had been set up, but skill and luck saved me. As an attorney, I took pride in my work. Law enforcement lamented that the system had been outwitted by a cunning lawyer, but in the end, I survived. Lottie set her beer aside, giving me a warm smile, then placed her hand on my shoulder in a show of support. We were at Chambers, the bar frequented by lawyers in town. Lottie had moved on to a new job, and I followed her here out of loyalty. Chambers was a much better spot for me to drink than Falcon's Rest, where the cops would never forgive me for beating them in court. Here, the regulars had a certain sympathy for a disgraced lawyer, a poor attorney with a ruined reputation. But that opinion wasn't entirely accurate. The clients I needed saw my acquittal on charges where I was clearly guilty as proof of my skills. The negative publicity had only made me raise my hourly rate and hire a young associate to help with the growing demand. Far from being tainted, I was becoming something of an anti-hero. Tanya, on the other hand, wasn't so lucky. She was forced out of the DA's office, made the scapegoat for the prosecution's failure. It didn't matter that she built her case on fabricated evidence. The public needed someone to blame, and she was the easiest target. Meanwhile, my career thrived. I had weathered the worst storm of my life, and ironically, it made me more successful than ever. I had a reputation now as a lawyer who could get the guilty off, deserved or not. At Chambers, I sipped my beer and leaned back, feeling the weight of recent events finally lift. My drinking buddy, Bob, another attorney, gulped down half his beer in one go. "Relax, Bob, no need to rush," I said. "I don't have a wife waiting for me at home, and yours isn't worth hurrying back to." I added with a smirk. Bob frowned, as he usually did when I mentioned his wife, Jenny. I think he finally realized that some women, no matter how beautiful, weren't worth the trouble. Jenny definitely fell into that category. "I'm sorry," Bob began, but couldn't quite finish. "Please," I waved him off. "I didn't ask for an apology. You must realize that, given the situation, none is expected. But I never meant to offend Elaine," he added, pleading. "Of course you didn't. It was an accident, Bob. A man like you isn't familiar with tools. You couldn't have known the bullets would go through Officer Moreno and strike the woman with him. And I object to calling what they were doing being with each other. They were screwing." Bob winced, clearly uncomfortable with the memory. "Exactly. He had the seats laid flat like a bed. You couldn't even see who was in the car. I was upset, freaking out after Jenny told me she was seeing him again." "Exactly. You were in a daze, barely aware of your actions. But tell me, did you wipe my tool for fingerprints before you planted it?" I asked quietly. Bob went pale, swallowing hard. "Probably, yes. I wasn't thinking straight. I stole it from your house during a visit. I planned to scare Paul to make him stay away. I knew you kept the tool in your bedroom." "I did," I said, staring into my beer. "It was a gift from a client. I kept it there to protect Elaine when I wasn't home." Bob nodded, and I wondered if he grasped the irony. The tool I had left to protect Elaine had been the one that eliminated her. "She told me she was going to see him again," Bob said, his voice shaking. "She told me, without any remorse. Paul needs some friendly reassurance," she said. I couldn't just do nothing. I drove to where I thought they'd be. His car wasn't there, and I panicked. I called home, no answer. I jumped to conclusions. "A reasonable mistake under the circumstances," I said flatly. "Yes," Bob whispered. "It was already raining hard when I reached the county road by the creek. I parked and walked down. On a good night, the moon would light everything up, but the weather was bad. I heard them laughing in the car. Then she moaned, and something in me snapped. I fired without thinking. I don't even remember holding the tool anymore." Bob took a deep breath, clearly shaken by the memory. "I didn't know Elaine was in the car until much later. I'm so sorry, Bruce. Are you going to tell the police?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I shrugged. "It's not for me to judge you, Bob. I'm many things, but I'm no hypocrite." "But I liquidated your wife," Bob said, as if trying to confess again. "Yes, but it was an accident. Just bad luck. I don't know how the car ended up in the creek. I thought it would be found sooner, but when it wasn't, people started pointing fingers at me." "Naturally," Bob said. "But without the bodies or the tool, they couldn't prove anything. I put a GPS tracker in Elaine's purse, so I knew where the car was. I assumed the creek carried it off and let it sink. The evidence was always there. It was just a matter of time before they found it. I'm sorry for all of it, and I'm sorry people still think you did it." "You should turn me in," Bob said, sounding resigned. I shook my head slowly. "We can't control what people think, Bob, and I'm not going to replace a convenient lie with an ugly truth. You're safe from me." "Then why did you invite me here?" Bob asked, clearly confused. "To give you this," I said, pulling a folded document from my jacket and handing it to him. "What is it?" he asked, eyeing the paper with suspicion. "My bill, of course," I replied calmly. "I've arranged one hell of a liquidation defense for you, Bob." "But you defended yourself. And whose fault is that? I spent time and money. The responsible party should pay. And I must say, I did a damn good job." Bob looked at the amount on the bill. "It's not too bad," he said hollowly. "It was a great defense," I corrected. Bob sighed and pulled out his wallet. "Do you take American Express?" "Of course," I said, watching him swipe his card. He looked relieved that I'd keep his secret, and I knew Bob would carry his guilt for the rest of his life. As for me, I had done what I had to do to survive. In a world where innocence is assumed guilty, I had to use my wits. After Bob left, Lottie brought me another beer. She saw the look on my face and asked, "Are you okay?" I nodded slowly. "Yes," I said. "Things are finally working out for the best." And as I sat there in the quiet bar, the weight of everything that had happened slowly began to fade. In the end, I had survived. And in this world, survival is all that matters.